Audio is off. There we go. Should be good to go. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Hope everybody's having a good day. Why did you start late? That's for me to know and for you to not find out. Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Do. There's my water bottle. Should be good to go. All right, so let's let people trickle in and we'll get some conversations going. In the meantime, I hope everybody's having a good Thursday. I know that I woke up very early and could not sleep very well. Greetings from a biologist desperately trying to get into theoretical physics. Well, you have quite the road ahead of you. I always have to refresh to get the live stream going. Well, that I don't know why that's the case. I don't know why that happens for you. It is the reality of the world we live in. That sometimes tech is just kind of annoying. And for that, I apologize. Why am I off center? I don't know how this happens, but like literally every day, my camera seems like it tilts a little bit more every day, and I have to fix it every day. And I don't know why. I don't think it's my cat. She doesn't come up on my desk very often. Got your mole biopsy results back and it's benign. Congrats. I'm glad to hear it. From Tim Davidson with the $5. Until the box is seen, it is both delivery and DiGiorno's. Schrodinger's pizza. Indeed it is. All right, let's bring up our first guest. Let me just double check something. Oh, I'm in the wrong. Okay, that's where I want to be. All right, let's bring up our first guest. Let's talk to Nick. I wonder if I've spoken with Nick before. Let's find out.
Hello.
Nick, how's it going?
It's doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay, Nick. Nick, have we spoken before?
I don't think so.
Okay, that works for me. So Nick, would you call yourself MAGA?
I did vote for Donald Trump, but MAGA is not an identity, it's a political slogan.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, that's just not true anymore. There are people who definitely call themselves MAGA. They say, you know, they're MAGA Republicans. They associate with an ideology called MAGA. I mean, like, if you just don't want to call yourself that, if you want to say that you align with the kinds of people who call themselves MAGA Republicans, that's fine.
Yeah, I would consider myself an American patriot.
Okay, Nick, I do have a few questions that I would just like to ask. It's just for my own edification. It's nothing like they're not gotchas. They're just 3 yes or no questions for a survey. Is that okay if we start with that?
Yeah.
So first, do you think climate change is happening? And if so, do you think humans are the main cause?
Yes, definitely. I think there is some form of climate change happening due to, industrial revolutions and definitely man-made things that can change the outcome of our atmosphere and things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And do you think that the vaccines that we typically administer to children and infants are generally safe and effective?
I think for the most part, but there's definitely room for scrutiny and questions behind the efficacy of those vaccines for sure.
So you would say that they're like generally safe and effective, but like, we should keep doing science?
Absolutely.
Okay. And third, do you think that humans evolved from non-human ancestors?
Do I think that humans evolved from non-human ancestors?
Yeah.
Can you give an example of a non-human ancestor?
Australopithecus.
And that is, in layman's terms?
It's a kind of primate that's not a human.
Uh, I don't know. That's a tricky. I'd have to
Okay.
say yes and no.
How about unsure?
Unsure. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. So those are all the questions. It's just interesting to get people's views on these things before we have these conversations. So look, the background here is that MAGA is anti-science. And here I'm referring to kind of the social movement, the political ideology, whatever you want to call it. And by anti-science, what I mean is something very specific. I mean that as a political movement, it rejects and or delegitimizes mainstream scientific consensus, and it also undermines the institutions and procedures that we use to produce scientific knowledge. So do you agree, disagree, or somewhere in between?
I mean, I would say that more so for, Democratic leaning. I would say that, more so on the Democratic side, they more so ignore science more than anybody.
So, I mean, we could have that conversation, but the question is about the kind of the MAGA wing of the Republican or of the right-leaning political movements in the United States. So, I mean, perhaps you think that the Democrats do this more. Do you think that the right-leaning MAGA wing of the right-leaning conservative political ideology does it at all?
I think you could definitely, if you really wanted to look for certain examples of conservative-leaning people ignoring science in certain topics, but I think as a whole, I wouldn't say that the MAGA movement is anti-science. I would actually say the opposite. I would say that conservatives are more for, science-based and fact-based, statistics than any other political organization.
So did you agree with my definition of what it means to be anti-science for a political movement?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I could give you examples of the MAGA movement, or the MAGA-aligned Republican movement, Republican political ideology, both rejecting mainstream scientific consensus and undermining the scientific institutions, would that be sufficient to convince you that MAGA is indeed anti-science?
Not as a whole, but I think that if you gave me some examples, I mean, I have no reason to disagree with that.
Okay, so let's start with the latter. So we're talking about undermining institutions and procedures. So are you familiar with the National Science Foundation?
Yeah, I'm loosely familiar.
So just in case the audience doesn't know, this is the largest non-medical science granting organization or science granting institution in the country. It's a federal institution. It's controlled by the executive branch. Are you aware that for the 2027 budget proposal produced by the Trump administration, which is kind of the head of the MAGA ideology, they're proposing to cut the National Science Foundation budget by 52%.
Yeah, I did hear something loosely along that lines. Yeah.
So would that be an example of, say, undermining the institutions that produce that scientific knowledge?
Well, I mean, without context behind the reasoning, no.
What reasoning would make it so that it's not undermining those institutions?
Well, I mean, there's several variables that go into cutting funding for certain institutions. It's not necessarily science-based as to why you would make those decisions.
Well, look, so I'm not saying that there's some science-based reason as to why they made this decision. That's kind of irrelevant. The question is whether or not they're undermining those institutions.
No, I wouldn't say they're directly undermining it, because they obviously have to have a reason as to why they would want to cut certain budgets.
So look, I mean, you can have a reason for things and still undermine them. What do you think the word undermine means?
No, you're absolutely correct. But I mean, by just saying that they're doing that is undermining it. I mean, you're leaving out a lot of context.
Well, what do you think the word undermining means?
To neglect or ignore.
Perhaps
certain
reduce
authority.
perhaps reduce the effectiveness of?
Yeah, you could say that too.
So the primary function of the National Science Foundation is to provide financial support for scientific investigations. So if you're cutting their budget by more than half, then it just seems like that their function, which is to provide money for scientific research, is being reduced.
Correct.
And so that would be undermining their goals, or undermining their, the purpose of that institution.
Correct. Absolutely. However, there has to be obviously a reason as to why that is being done. Either the actors in question are not acting in an ethical sense, or maybe they're not putting the money towards something they're supposed to. There's obviously repercussions for everything that we do and do not do in this world. So like I said, there's got to be context behind that decision.
So are you aware that so this happened last year too? In 2025, Trump's administration proposed a basically equal size cut to the National Science Foundation. And as a consequence of that proposed cut, the National Science Foundation, whose head is a Trump appointee, just ordered the cutting of thousands of scientific grants. In fact,
wow.
This included cutting hundreds of grants to UCLA, many of which went to the mathematics department, which is a little bit strange. Why would they cut math funding?
That is a good question. However, I don't know. That's a great question that you're asking.
What I'm getting at is that it seems like that this is a standard operating procedure for the Trump administration to try to cut the funding for scientific institutions. And if this was just the National Science Foundation, maybe you have a point. Maybe there's a reason why the National Science Foundation would be getting this big cut. Maybe they're not achieving their goals or whatever. But it's not just the National Science Foundation. The science division of NASA has received, or is proposed to receive, a roughly 50% cut. The portion of the Department of Agriculture that does climate science has received, or has had proposed, a large cut to it as well. The National Institute of Health has a proposed large cut. The Department of Energy, which a lot of scientific funding comes from, has a proposed large cut for the scientific branch. So it seems like this is just a trend in the Trump administration. Where'd you go? When you're off the app, I can't hear you. Oh, and he ran. Okay. Well, that didn't last long. All right, let's bring up our next guest. Let's talk to Lavina. Lavina, how's it going?
Good yourself?
I'm doing all right. Lavina, would you call yourself MAGA?
I just wanted to say that I think you're a pretty smart guy, and yeah.
So yes, you would consider yourself MAGA?
No.
Okay, well, thanks for being here, Lavina. I think you just wanted to come up and glaze, which, fine, I guess. But I would appreciate if only opposition joined, right? What happened to Nick? He disconnected. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he didn't want to have that conversation anymore. I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. Don't you hate that feeling? That feeling that you're going to sneeze, but you don't yet? Nope, not. So you can join via Discord if you're watching on YouTube, or you can join via TikTok. Either one works. They're both valid ways to join. Just make sure that you're 18 plus and we can have a conversation about it. Look into a bright light. Interestingly enough, it's called the photic sneeze reflex. It's what this effect of looking into a bright light causing you to sneeze is. That's only present in like a third of the population. and yeah, also called the autosomal dominant, or what is it? It's the it's also called Achu. But anyway, it's only present in like a third of the population or something like this. I do have it, but not everybody does. From Christopher Sanford, with the 5 pounds, another example of undermining science might be to suppress funding all applications containing keywords like women or trans, for example. Yes, that is a great example. Can we talk about the moon landing? I mean, in principle, yeah, if you want to come and like deny that the moon landing happened, I can assure you that the kinds of people who are more likely to deny that the kinds of people who will deny the moon landing happened are more likely to be MAGA than they are to be, you know, Democrats or whatever. Let's talk to DNJ. DNJ, how's it going?
What's going on, bro? Yo, I've been waiting to talk to you about this ever since those guys, quote unquote, went back to the moon just now.
Okay, before we start, are you MAGA?
MAGA? I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what that is.
Okay, well, but today we are doing politics, so we got to keep it political, which means that I gotta let you go. Let's talk to Holy Guacamole. Holy Guacamole, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Holy Guacamole, are you MAGA?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask you just a few questions before we get started? They're simple yes or no, or perhaps unsure.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just got to write your name down. So you said that you would call yourself MAGA?
Yeah, reformed MAGA, but I'm still there. I'm enough to talk to you about it.
Okay.
Definitely gonna have opposition.
Do you think that climate change is happening? And if so, do you think that humans are the main cause?
Yes and no.
Okay. Do you think that vaccines that we typically administer to babies and small children, that these are typically safe?
Say it one more time. That last part. I just missed that last part.
That they're generally safe.
Safe, yes. They said fake. Safe. S-A-F-E.
Yeah, I should say safe and effective, meaning that like
Yeah.
they do what they're meant to
Safe
do.
and effective.
Okay.
Yes.
And would you say that humans evolved from non-human ancestors?
No.
Okay. All right. Now we can talk about any of those topics if you want, but we don't have to. I just take this questionnaire because it's interesting for me. So look.
No, it's your show. Carry it however you like to.
So the background says MAGA is anti-science. What I mean by that is two things. One, that specifically, that as a political movement or an ideology, if you will, that the MAGA ideology tries to reject or delegitimize mainstream scientific consensuses, and that it undermines institutions that produce that scientific knowledge. So those are the criteria I would use to evaluate the, you know, whether or not a political movement or a political ideology is anti-science. Is that fair?
Fair enough. In your opinion, yeah, sure.
Well,
and let me ask you this: when you say MAGA, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask you this: when you say MAGA, right? Are you saying me as like a person that is like part of the Republican Party and the movement? Or are you saying Trump?
So generally, what I mean is whatever Trump is at the head of, whatever political ideology / movement Trump is at the head of, I mean that. There are like, you know, never Trumper Republicans who probably wouldn't fall into that category. There are like, you know, just like classical conservatives who only voted for Trump because they want low taxes and they don't really care about all of this like political ideology stuff.
Yeah, I'm somewhere between that.
They probably wouldn't fall into that category. But the kind of people who like the kind of stuff that Trump is doing, voted for him because of the, you know, the Make America Great Again movement and all that. That's what I mean.
I don't know if I fit the category then because I'm in between that. So I may not be but I do know them. I do know them very well.
Okay, no. So I'm not going to kick you off. So
sure.
Look, do you think that like that wing of the Republican Party, do you think that wing is anti-science given the definition I've offered, pro-science, or somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between. Yeah, it depends on where they're on the spectrum of it. If they're too far into it, yes.
To be clear, I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about kind of the political ideology more generally.
Like, okay,
like for example, and just to give you an example of what I mean, like we would say that like the liberal political ideology in the United States is generally pro-green energy, right?
Right.
Like there are definitely going to be like liberals who are not pro-green energy, But like as a general statement, it would be true to say that the liberal movement in the United States is pro-green energy. So that's what I mean. I mean, like the MAGA movement is generally anti-science. It doesn't mean that every single MAGA person is. It doesn't mean that that there aren't
Understood.
Yeah. So that's what I'm getting at.
I get what you're saying. I think, and I've heard some of your arguments about grant-based stuff and the National Science Organization, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And he's defunding the grants. And I heard Nick touching on the basis of how it depends. It's like depending on what it's for, and if it's seeing that it's wasted budget, right? I don't feel like the MAGA movement is like totally against science. I definitely don't see them being, like you have good flat earth debates, for example. I don't see them all rejecting this entirely. I see that maybe I wonder if there's a bias because you're a PhD and you need those grants, right?
Well, yeah,
and
I mean, like
amongst your peers.
So you might think, and I'm not making any sort of normative claim that this is either good or bad, right? What I'm saying is that it is anti-science. I mean, you might think that in this case, as far as grant funding goes for scientific research, that it's good to be anti-science, that like it's more important that we spend that money elsewhere, and so being anti-science is the responsible and good thing to do. That's like, I'm not making the claim that it's good or bad, I'm just making a descriptive claim that they are anti-science.
I don't think they are though. I think that it's just I think there is funding. Like he ramped up the program with the COVID vaccines, right? He was behind that, and I mean that's science, right?
Yep.
And we just had the Artemis 2, right? And he's in.
Well, I'm not sure if the Artemis 2 mission is really science, but you bring up the COVID.
Define science. There you go.
Well, so I would say science is the study of the natural world, or perhaps the study of the human world, using the scientific method to try to better understand the way things work around us. Now,
cutting edge.
Yeah, well, I mean, sure. The Artemis mission, I would say, is more exploration, and exploration and science can be related, but I wouldn't say that they're the same thing. Now, just as an aside, you did bring up the COVID, like Operation Warp Speed, and that's one of the things that I actually commend Trump for doing in his first term. But consider how people have reacted, how the MAGA movement ideology has developed around the COVID vaccine. Is it generally pro-COVID vaccine or anti-COVID vaccine?
No, it's anti. It's anti.
Right. It's even
anti,
though Trump did this, the MAGA movement, the MAGA political ideology is not in favor of that.
It is. Yeah. When you brought up the ideology, it's almost I can't bring too much opposition. I can only speak independently, and I couldn't. Yeah. I mean, you would be a fool not to see that type of ideology with that. Yeah.
I mean, and look, like you can.
I get your question here.
So you can hold the view that like it's actually good to like reduce our interest and reduce our funding in science because we have higher priorities. It's actually good because we don't want to trust those scientists because they're lying to us. You can hold that view. I don't
have that view.
I'm not saying you, I mean people in general.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it's dishonest to say that the MAGA ideology is not anti-science. I mean, it is, and maybe you think that's a good thing. Again, not you, just people in just the movement in general.
Can you give me any other, like, moving outside of the grants, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because I don't know enough about, I don't know much. You're going to know a lot more than any of these topics because you're obviously, you have a PhD in science,
Sure.
Right? So what other things would you, like, top 3 things would you say that the MAGA movement is, like, really defines anti-science?
Yeah, so
we have the grants.
There's kind of 3 pieces here, and one piece I didn't even mention. So there's the grants, which the National Institute for Health also had its grant or proposed to have its granting capabilities cut. The National Science Foundation, NASA, all of these 3-letter or federal organizations having their scientific research budgets cut. Then there's scientific instruments that have been either proposed to be canceled or actually canceled. There's a satellite that exists, in orbit of Earth, and it monitors carbon dioxide. And Trump had this satellite decommissioned, meaning it would just eventually crash back into the Earth. Nobody's able to collect data using it anymore because it was inconvenient politically. So this would be shutting down scientific instruments because they're inconvenient politically. I think that's an example of MAGA being anti-science. And then a third criteria is that the citizens, the people who call themselves or who affiliate with the anti-science or the MAGA movement generally tend to reject the scientific consensus far more frequently than any other population group or than any other political population group. And so we could talk, for example, about we could talk, for example, about the efficaciousness of vaccines. For example, people who call themselves
What
MAGA,
does that word mean? Sorry, efficaciousness.
It just means how effective a thing is at achieving its goal.
Okay.
Sorry, it's just a word that sounds good.
No worries. I got you.
I could have just said effectiveness, right? So for example, people who affiliate with MAGA are more likely to think that vaccines that we give to kids cause autism, right?
I run into them, yes.
And so like that's strictly non-scientific. That has been debunked time and time again by the scientific community, the medical community in particular. It's also the case that people who identify as MAGA are less likely to even think that climate change is happening. Whether or not they think that it's caused by humans, they're less likely to think that it's happening at all.
It's a strange position to find non-extremists. What we talked about earlier, MAGA, but the ideology. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, you're going to have those more in there when they're still rocking the hat, especially given the times right now politically. I would suppose.
I mean, look, it's not to say that like every MAGA thinks that evolution is fake and that climate change is a hoax and that vaccines are, vaccines cause autism. But if you were to find somebody who believes all of those things, the odds of them being MAGA is like 90%.
Yeah, I get you. With that, I wish the next person luck. It did give me a lot more insight to like what you're proposing there, because there's really no debating that. I would think so myself. Yeah, I think for me the debate would just be more like the overall science. Like I think it's a big statement. I don't really agree like overall like because there is funding there. He doesn't completely slash it all, and he has done things that do help science. I mean,
look, my view on that, and like absolutely, I agree. Like the National Science, according to Trump's proposed budget, the National Science Foundation would still have a budget of $4 billion, but that's $4 billion less than it got last year, or got this year rather. So, and my way of explaining why this is still anti-science is, imagine that you are, and we always have to link back to Nazi Germany, of course, right? Like because it's a good way to convey an idea. Imagine that we're living in Nazi Germany, right? This is a perhaps. This didn't actually happen, but imagine it did. So imagine that it's 1933.
Analogy,
So imagine it's 1933. Hitler comes to power. Hitler doesn't start immediately, sending Jews to death camps. Instead, he just says, if you're Jewish, you have to pay 50% of your income to for tax. It's the Jew tax, right? Now, he's not taking all of the Jews' money, but it's still anti-Jewish, right?
Yeah.
And so, even if you don't take all of the scientists' money, it can still be anti-science.
Yeah, right. Especially if you don't put I guess you can't put like how percent of his anti-science he is up there, and so there. It is still anti-science to pull half of funding and keep it there, because you could technically, my opinion is there's plenty of money that shouldn't cut it. There's no need to cut it. But
look, you might have a point, and I don't mean you, I mean just generally.
Yeah.
You might be able to excuse cutting the National Science Foundation and all of these other. The National Science Foundation is the most egregious. That's why I harp on that. But there might be an explanation for why this is happening that's not anti-science if all of the departments were getting cuts. But if you go look at the proposed budget for what is supposed to be getting cut, it's the scientific organizations are getting proposed cuts, and then other things are getting increases, like the military. The military budget is getting like an enormous budget increase, right? The Department of War is supposed to get a 43%, at least proposed 43% budget increase. The National Nuclear Security Administration is supposed to get a 12% budget increase. The Department of Justice is supposed to get a 13% budget. So it's not that everything is getting cut across the board because we have to save money. It's specifically the things that fund our scientific endeavors in the United States are getting cut. And that sounds like it's
when you bring up that, this is where I turn my nose against the MAGA movement, because that's where he lost me. That's where the plot got lost a bit. And so, I think you got great points there, Dr. Blitz. And maybe I come back. You're doing this once a week?
Depends on how I'm feeling, but I'm thinking about doing it on Thursdays, at least for the time being.
I'm gonna try to look at those percentages so I can come back to you a little bit more prepared with those 3 categories, and we can have even a better discourse about it.
So just that way, then you can find them. I can show you the link to get to the proposed budget. Yeah. So let me pull it up really quick.
Your nose is healing great, by the way.
Yeah, it really is. It's I mean, I'll probably have a scar, but it's looking a lot better than it was last week.
A lot better, yeah.
So here we have the budget of the U.S. government as proposed by the Office of Management and Budget, fiscal year 2027. So if you look up, I actually just clicked on this from a link, and this is an annoying URL to type in. But if you look up the budget of the U.S. government, Office of Management and Budget, fiscal year 2027, I imagine you'll find it. And in this document, if you go down to the very bottom, it has a summary of the for the various agencies, the discretionary request by major agencies, and so on. So this is the thing that I've been referencing, and in particular,
that's what I'll focus on and see where I go with it.
Sounds good. Thanks for being here.
Well,
bud.
thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course. Take care.
Take care.
All right, let us move on to our next guest. He was pleasant and delightful. Okay. I don't think I was muted for that. That's okay. It's not a big deal. Sorry about that. Let me just read some super chats and we'll move on to our next guest. From Tim Davidson with the $5. Autosomal compelled helio-ophthalmic outburst. The bastards called it ACHU. Yeah, this is what's called a backronym. This is that reflex that some people have where when they look at a bright light, it causes them to sneeze. And I do have that. From Adam Hurst with the $10, Blitz is the man, screw maggots. I mean, there are some people that I'd say like, yeah, screw you. But, you know, the guy that we just spoke to seems fine. From DJ Arpy with the $2, check color audio chain like doubled causing phase. Yeah, I realized earlier, I realized at the beginning of that conversation that I was duplicating their audio, so that should be fixed now. Sorry about that. From Chase Martin Physics with the $5. Don't forget Trump wanted to close one LIGO interferometer because we don't need 2 of them. Anyone that knows about LIGO knows the issue with this. I know. That's crazy. It's a crazy thing to do, to propose. From the Thinking Man with the 10 pounds, humans are like diamonds. That one nitrogen in artificial red diamonds actually reflects why imperfections in brains make stuff work. It's only when symmetry breaks interesting things happen. What is this trying to convey? I don't know what this is trying to convey, but thank you. From HCAS with the $50, which is very generous, and I believe in you a lot. I believe in you. I appreciate you. Sorry, I was reading something else. Agree with you on some topics and disagree on others. Either way, I love that you have intellectually honest conversations. Also, generally listening to you has helped with learning the art of debate. Well, I appreciate that. And look, it's fine if you disagree with me on some topics. You know, most people disagree with most people on most things, or on at least one thing, rather. So that's fine, and I do appreciate the support. All right, let's bring up our next guest. This person has a name that is surely going to get them brought up in a lot of these debate spaces, so let's bring them up. Their name is Libs Triggered by MAGA 69. It's only incomplete because you don't have 420XX on either end. Libs Triggered, how's it going?
Doing all right.
Have we spoken before, Libs?
No.
Okay. Libs, do you mind if I ask you just a few quick yes or no, or maybe like unsure questions just before we get started?
I don't mind.
All right. So the first question is, would you consider yourself MAGA?
Yes.
Okay. The second question is, if you think climate change is real, do you think that humans are the main cause?
Yes.
Okay. Second question, do you think that the vaccines that we typically administer to young children and babies are generally safe and effective?
Yes.
Okay. And do you think that humans evolved from non-human ancestors?
I'm gonna say not sure on that one.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So, and again, this is, that's not going to have an impact on our conversation. I'm just curious. Now, the background says MAGA is anti-science. I mean something pretty specific by that. What I mean is that generally the political ideology, or perhaps the people affiliated with that political ideology, reject or delegitimize mainstream scientific consensus, and that the political ideology seeks to undermine the institutions that produce scientific knowledge. Is that a fair working definition?
I mean, not fair for everyone. Like, I'm not anti-science. I might be skeptical on some stuff, but I'm not gonna be like, science is like completely, out there.
Well, I was just asking if the definition that I gave you is like a fair definition of what it means to be for a political movement to be anti-science.
I guess so.
Okay. So if I could give you examples of, say, the head of the MAGA movement seeking to undermine institutions that produce science, or if I could give you examples of MAGA self-identified MAGA people or self-identified MAGA voters rejecting mainstream scientific consensus, would that at least lead you to believe that MAGA tends to be anti-science?
I mean, I'm not going to speak for like the whole, MAGA community, but I mean, I'm pretty sure there are some people out there that's like anti-science. So I'm pretty sure you can give me some, like some examples, or that might, sway me.
Well, so I'm not talking about individual people. I'm talking about the movement as a whole, right?
Well, I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest.
Okay, I mean, that's fair. So it just sounds like you did agree that the criteria I gave you for a political movement to be classified as anti-science was a good criteria. It sounded like you agreed with it. And it sounded like you said that if I gave you examples that fit that criteria, examples of the movement that fits that criteria, you're not sure if it would still be qualified as anti-science.
Yeah, because I mean, not everyone is going to be anti-science. Like,
I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about an ideology, a movement, not individuals.
I guess so.
I mean, like, and just to give you an example, I gave this to the last guy. It would be reasonable to say that the liberal political ideology in the United States is pro-green energy, right?
I would have to say so, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that every single liberal is pro-green energy. It just means that like the political movement as a whole is. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the MAGA movement as a whole is anti-science. I'm not saying that there aren't any people who self-identify as MAGA that are pro-science. I'm sure these people exist. I'm just talking about the ideology, the movement as a whole.
Oh, okay. I think I know. I see what you're trying to say. Okay.
Like the general tendency, right?
Yeah.
So if I could give you examples of like the head of the MAGA movement doing things that are, seeking to undermine the scientific institutions that produce scientific knowledge, and if I could give you data that indicates that the general population of people who self-identify as MAGA reject scientific consensus, it seems like that would meet the criteria then.
You're right. I would have to assume so, yeah.
So if I told you that, do you know what the National Science Foundation is?
I hear about it every once in a while. I'm not really big into science, but you can explain it to me if you want. Yes.
Yeah. So, across the United States, scientific research is, depending on what you're doing, it can be fairly expensive. You have to buy equipment, you have to pay researchers, you have to, spend money on computers and all sorts of things. So the National Science Foundation is one of the biggest sources of funding for scientific research in the United States. Basically, every year you have tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of scientists writing grants. These are like, writing reports, writing, well, you know what a grant is, writing grants to the National Science Foundation saying, I deserve money to study this thing, and these are the goals, and this is what it's going to cost, and this is where all that money is going to go, and this is how it'll benefit society, and so on and so forth. And every year, the National Science Foundation looks through those grant applications and then says, okay, this one's going to get funding, that one's not going to get funding, this one's going to get funding, that one's not going to get funding. Fine. And then they give money to the researchers to go do science. Now, so that is the primary job of the National Science Foundation, is to give out money to scientists to do science. Now, the Trump administration has proposed a budget for next year that would cut the amount of money that the National Science Foundation gets by 52%, which means that the National Science Foundation would have 52% less money available to give to scientists to do research. So it seems like that would be exactly an example of undermining the scientific institutions that produce scientific knowledge, because with less money means less research can be done, which means we generate less scientific knowledge.
Oh, okay, there we go. So would that just mean like, because I'm trying to, is he outright saying that he's wants to do it because he doesn't like how things are going, or is it because he wants to allocate it towards something that he might think is, needs to go somewhere else?
It's actually not relevant at all why it's happening. Right.
So
The fact is that's what was proposed. So I'm not worried about what the motivation is. I'm not worried about what explanations they give for why we should cut science. I'm looking at the actions and the beliefs, right? What do people believe and what do people do?
I'm sort of confused at the moment, because are you trying to say, like, since he's cutting it and or giving less money to the foundation or to the science foundation, he's anti-science?
Well, so one of the criteria for a political movement to be anti-science is that it undermines the institutions that produce scientific knowledge. And cutting funding is one of the best ways to undermine an institution.
Okay, I'm trying to get where I'm trying to see where you're coming from, because I don't know if I'm like misunderstanding or if or what is going on, but it just sounds like he has better places for that money to go other than science. I mean, it doesn't mean he's anti-science or the group is anti-science. It just, I feel like he's putting it where he thinks it's necessary for it to go, right?
Well, look, so I think that two things can be true at once. I think that on the one hand, it can be true that Donald Trump thinks, or Donald Trump's administration anyway, thinks that that money, it would be better spent somewhere else. And that doesn't make it any less anti-science to do that, right? And let me just give you an example of like a less politically charged example. Suppose that, we as a civilization, as a country, we've decided that, at least for the past 50 years or something like this, we've decided that it's worthwhile to fund our national parks, right? Like, we think that it's important that we have nature. We, as Americans, we appreciate nature, right? That's just a thing that we care about. Now, part of that, some of that funding goes towards funding park rangers. Some of that funding goes towards funding fire departments to put out forest fires. Some of that funding goes towards maintenance and, all of these things. Now, it could be so I don't know how much money goes towards maintaining our national parks, but let's say it's $1 billion a year, just to make the number easy and round. If Donald Trump then says, let's take half of that, $500 million of that $1 billion every year, and let's just put it in the military instead. Now, you could say, oh, well, maybe we need that money for the military. But I think that you would be just as reasonable to say that it's still true that he's anti-national park.
And see, I don't know. See, that's what's getting me is I don't think he's anti-national park or anti-science if he's allocating it for something that he thinks it's better to go. It's like saying that if he gives them more money, right? If he gives them more money, that he's pro national park or pro.
That's exactly what it would mean.
That's exactly what it would mean.
If Donald Trump doubled the national park funding, then I would say, yeah, he's in favor of national parks.
Well, I would just think that's where where it needs to go.
Well, look,
right?
So why do you... The way that we figure out what gets our priority is the things that we care about. So if he cared about national parks, then national parks would take a higher priority in his hierarchy of things that he cares about. And so If he is pro-national park, of course he's going to think it's more important. And if he's anti-national park, of course he's going to think it's less important. The same is true for science.
And I don't know, because it seems to me that it just, like I said before, it just seems like that's where he wants that money to go to, right? I don't really think he's anti-science or anti.
Well, look, this isn't the only criterion. The first one of the criteria was that it undermines the institutions that generate scientific knowledge. That's only one of the criteria. If that was the only thing that happened, then maybe you would have a point that, oh well, he's not really anti-science. Science is just a casualty. It's just collateral damage. But it goes deeper than that, right? So we can look in other places. For example, there is a telescope that was pointed at the Earth. This is an orbiting telescope from the International Space Station, I believe. No, I'm sorry, it was separate from the International Space Station. It was an orbiting satellite. And its job was to monitor carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Now, last year, Trump discontinued this satellite. He shut it down. So now it's going to, eventually it's going to crash back into the Earth. Nobody can use the data that it could have collected. It's just gone. Now, the reason for this, and in fact, we explicitly know the reason for this. Let me just pull it up really quick. Where is it?
I was gonna say real fast. I think
go ahead.
That's important.
So there is
I will think that.
Yeah.
I will think that is very important, because it's monitoring sensitive, especially when it's monitoring sensitive stuff, and so, instead of just letting it crash, I would think that we would, try to get that, whatever data it has on it before it would crash. I mean, even if it did, let's say, for example, like for me, we need that. We need that to monitor.
Let me tell you why it was proposed to be shut down. So this is according to NASA. NASA, the head of NASA is appointed by Donald Trump, is appointed by the executive branch. It was being shut down, quote, to align with the president's agenda and budget priorities. So this is politically motivated, right?
I would say that
why would shutting down the orbiting carbon observatories align with the president's agenda?
I would be against that, because if it's aligned with political ideology, instead of just letting it do its job like it's supposed to, and we're just shutting it down for some, excuse my language, bullshit reasons, like a political idea, or if it goes against somebody's their way of thinking, I would think that's BS.
Well, if you think that's BS, let me tell you about something else. So again, this was last year in their budget proposal. Actually, this wasn't even in their budget proposal. This was a separate thing. So there was, it's still happening. A laboratory, a national laboratory called the National Center for Atmospheric Research. This is in Boulder, Colorado. Donald Trump's administration last year started the process of shutting down that national laboratory. Now, that national laboratory is basically the center for research or the Center for Earth Systems Scientific Research. And the reason it's being shut down, the proposed reason for it being shut down by, this is a quote from Ross Vaught, who was at least the director of the White House Office of Management and Budget, is that, quote, it is the largest sources of climate alarmism in the country. So this is not because, we need to use that money better elsewhere. It's because we disagree with the science that it's putting out.
I would also think that's BS, because, I mean, I do believe there's climate change, and it's clear. I used to be like anti-climate. I thought it was kind of like BS, because you'll hear all this stories like, the world's going to end at this exact day, right? And then when that exact date comes, you're like, it didn't end like they said they would. And I've been through so many of those end of the world scenarios, to the point where I just thought it was BS, until I started seeing changes in the area that I live, because normally we'll have like 4 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
and I would know each one because you will feel it. But now it only feels like you only have 2 instead of 4, and I'm like, okay, this is starting to feel like there's some type of reason why they're saying this. Maybe that when they said the world was going to end, and maybe that had my, where I just thought, oh, maybe that's just a crazy lunatic talking. But now when I start actually noticing stuff happening in my own area, it made me actually start rethinking some of that, what they were saying about climate change.
I mean, and so, look, I'm glad that you have reevaluated it, but isn't it kind of strange that it took until it personally affected you for you to take the science seriously?
I would have to say so, yes. I mean, I guess I would have to notice the change for me to actually to see if it was true, I guess.
So
if that's fair to say.
And this might be surprising to you. It's surprising. It actually was really surprising to me when I found out about it too. One sec, let me pull something up really quick. So there was an analysis done at Berkeley that examined the large, like the what's the word? Not large. The major climate model predictions since the 70s. So, there's always these stories about how, they've been predicting that the climate's going to explode or whatever, every year for the last 30 years or something like this, right? Like that's a thing that people say. It's not true. It's strictly not true that these climate models have really been wrong in the past. And if I could find it, I would love to find it. Oh yeah, here it is. If I could find it, I'll just tell you about it. So this was an analysis that was conducted in 2019 by it wasn't conducted by Berkeley, it was reported by Berkeley, and then the paper was published in Geophysics Research Letters, which is a scientific journal.
Right.
Anyway, so what they did is they examined 17 major climate models that were published between the early 1970s and the late 2000s. So this is, all of those climate models that are talking about, how the global average temperature is going to change and what's going to happen and all of this stuff. What they found is that 14 of the 17 major climate models that were published between those dates were pretty accurate. And of the ones that were not accurate, the reason they were not accurate is because they weren't able to foresee things that humans did. So for example, and this is discussed in, I'll just show you the thing I'm looking at. This is discussed in the article. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, so there's one, there's one quote iconic climate model that was published by James Hansen of NASA in 1988. And this is one that a lot of people are like, oh, it got it so wrong, because the predictions for temperatures after 1988 were 50% higher than what actually ended up happening. So people are like, oh, he got it wrong. Like he was off by 50%, which is a lot. But the reason why he was wrong is because the world came together and put forward the Montreal Protocol, which went into effect in 1989. And so, of course, he couldn't foresee that humans were going to, do an international collaboration to ban CFCs, these were the things that caused the hole in the ozone layer. Of course, he couldn't predict that. So, of course, his model was going to be wrong. But if you account for that, then his calculations are right. So what I'm saying is it's just not the case that these climate models have actually been overwhelmingly wrong. They've been overwhelmingly right. It's just the news and the media tend to overblow things.
Ask you, what is the Montreal Protocol?
Yeah,
that was before my time.
Yeah. No, that's fine. So, do you remember the hole in the ozone layer thing?
As a kid, yes.
Yeah,
they were trying to say that we was burning a hole in the ozone, and if we kept on doing it, that it would take out the ozone where it protects us from UV
is what it does.
Radiation. Yeah.
So right, so that was a real thing that was happening. This was happening in like this. I think it started in the 70s, but it was definitely a thing in the 80s. And what was found after studying this is that the thing that was basically destroying the ozone layer was a kind of chemical that was used in refrigerants, I want to say, and like hairspray. It's called a chlorofluorocarbon. It's a type of molecule that was used for some things. And it was basically, we started using those chemicals all over the place, and that's what was destroying the ozone layer. So in 1988, or rather in 1989, the whole world came together and we banned it. We banned that chemical. We banned those kinds of chemicals. So now you just can't get those kinds of chemicals anymore, except in like very specific, like there are some exceptions, but like with very few exceptions, you just can't get those chemicals anymore. And so the ozone layer has been healing since then. Like we're not emitting all of these chlorofluorocarbons, so like the hole in the ozone layer is shrinking. And so that's what the Montreal Protocol did. It was an international treaty, and it was probably one of the most successful climate treaties that humans have ever conducted, because it worked. It happened. We succeeded, and now we solved that problem, right? But so what I'm getting at is that when the climate models got it wrong, they got it wrong because they weren't able to predict things like the Montreal Protocol, being agreed upon. But setting that aside, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that makes sense because you can't predict
right. You can't predict geopolitics.
Yeah, because you cannot predict like what somebody's going to put into place like 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road,
right?
Because that will just mess up projections of what may occur down the road. Right.
I mean, you just have to work with what you have. And so, anyway, the only reason I bring this up is because this idea, and it's a totally reasonable idea, because if you pay attention to the media, this is what they say, especially the right-wing media. The idea that like the climate models were all wrong all the time, it's not really true. And so it shouldn't just require your own personal experience in order to think that it's a thing that's really happening. Now, I'm glad that you are on board with climate change now. I'm just saying that it is kind of weird that I imagine the media landscape that you exist in led you to the conclusion that the science isn't to be trusted, and you only started believing the science when it started affecting you personally.
Well, I don't believe everything that the news puts out there, right?
Well, I'm not saying you do.
Like, I make my own personal decisions and my own opinions. Like, for example, like, I'm not going to believe what other people are like. What's a good example? Like, if Trump came out the next day and said that global warming is fake, I wouldn't believe him.
He did say that, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, let me give another example.
I think he said it in 2015, I think, or maybe 2016.
My bad.
Yeah,
Let's just say, if Trump came out tomorrow and says the sun doesn't exist, it's just a light bulb in the sky,
right?
I would make my own opinion on that. Like, I don't believe every single thing that the guy says or anybody says. I make my decisions based on, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Right. No, and I'm not saying that you just believe whatever anybody says. What I'm saying is that, look, we all exist in an information ecosystem, right? Like, I go on Reddit and I read Reddit, and then I'll watch clips on TikTok, and I'll turn on the TV and watch news. We're all surrounded by information coming in all directions. And so depending on what kind of information ecosystem that you exist in, the information that you get can still seep into your brain, even if you're not just believing them right off the bat. If you hear the same thing from Facebook, and you hear the same thing from Fox, and you hear the same thing from the president, and you hear the same thing from your local congressman, well, then it becomes a lot easier to think, oh, like maybe that's true, right? And it kind of works its way into the thinking. I
see where you're coming from too, because like the more you tell it, the more likely you're going to believe it. And so I've noticed that a lot, and when I make my make my own opinions on these types of stuff, like I try to push all that what a lot of people are trying to say about it, right? Like I'm going to what's the best way I could say this? Like I try to do as much research on that topic from different different sources. Like I'll go on to the left where they might be talking about it, and I'll go on the right, and I'll try to find people in the middle, and I'll try to I'll try to find different sources on the topic so I can at least get a see where I can base my opinion on that, right? I don't base it on just one source.
Right, but so what I'm getting at, though, and I hope you agree with me, that, like, you and I, neither of us are climate scientists, right? Like, this is a complicated kind of science. There's a lot of variables involved.
I dabble in, like, cybersecurity, so
I do physics. Like, I'm not a climate scientist, right? And so, you know, I'm not particularly well equipped to, like, examine all of the data myself and come to the conclusions about what's true and what's false regarding climate science. So I think the most reasonable thing to do, and I hope that you agree with me, is that you should listen to the people who are climate scientists and listen to what the collection of climate scientists say about something. Because, you know, if there's 10,000 climate scientists in the country, I don't know how many there actually are, but let's say there's 10,000, and let's say 9,900 of them all say that this is what all of the data says, it just seems most likely true that they're right about that. Right? Because they know better than I do about climate science, and they're not all going to be wrong because they're experts.
Right. And let me ask you, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What if they're is what they say is political motivated, right?
Well,
what
it's a good
should
question.
Still believe them?
It's a good question. And so let's consider the alternatives, right? So on the one hand, suppose for a moment that we don't know for sure, but suppose for a moment that we think the scientists might be politically motivated. Okay, well, what are the other options? So maybe we don't believe the scientists. Who should we believe? Well, we shouldn't believe the politicians. They're obviously politically motivated.
Right.
Should we believe the media? No, they're obviously politically motivated.
Right.
Like should we just believe like the guy down at the lolocal watering hole? Like why would he know anything about anything? Should we just so I think probably the best bet, it's not a sure thing, but I think probably the best bet is to just assume that the scientists are least likely to be politically motivated of all of the people who are telling us things. And so even though we might be wrong about that, it's at least probably if I were a betting man, I would put my money on the scientists with regards to what the science is. Maybe they are politically motivated. Maybe they're all wrong about this thing, or maybe they're all lying to us. But it just seems like on the measure of what's most likely to be true, it seems like the scientists are less likely to be politically motivated, or less likely to be wrong than, you know, anybody else who might be telling me something about science anyway.
I guess I can see where you're coming from there, like, because they're the ones that studying this and researching this and doing all the necessary stuff. And so you might have some people in that let's say laboratory where they're doing all the research at. They might have some people that might lean to the left or to the right. So, you know, I guess I get where you're trying to come from. Like, I mean, they might feel different about whatever they're researching in.
Yeah, I mean, like, so generally, I think that so for what it's worth, it is true that most scientists are left of center, or at least more than the total population is, right? Just for whatever reason. But I think that, like, to say that scientists care more about politics than they care about doing good science, I think is probably just a bit of a stretch. And there's a lot more scientists than there are politicians, right? And so you'd have to have an even bigger kind of conspiracy about political motivation than for these scientists all being politically motivated. And so look, all I'm suggesting, and I think that this is just like a good way to figure out what's true, is that if you're trying to figure out what's true about some scientific thing, like, is the Earth getting warmer? Does this kind of medicine actually work? Is XYZ psychiatric disorder linked to, some hormone? Is overfishing this kind of fish causing a decrease in, or an increase in algae population? Like, if you're asking some question about the way the world is, and the way that human societies interact with the world, it seems like the best way to get the answer is to just go listen to what the scientists are telling you, the relevant scientists who study that thing.
I get that.
Sorry, just one more thing. And just to kind of bring it full circle, I think that it's useful and important that people in the United States are well informed on the way the world works, and that means that we need to fund science. We need to spend money on scientists. And so I think giving power to a political organization or a political ideology that is definitely reducing funding, is reducing the amount of scientific research that we can produce, I think that that's probably not a good thing for our country.
I mean, I kind of get where you're coming from, because science is important and it should be funded. I mean, and they might not get the exact same amount of money that they should, but it doesn't make it more less important, right? So
I mean, we'll always ask for more money. Of course, we'll always ask for more money, but like, there is a line, right, where if the level of funding has been this much for 20 years, and then all of a sudden someone comes in and proposes that we cut it in half, well, that would be pretty destructive, right?
I get it, like, because you might be working on a project that might need that funding going in, and since it's like somebody comes in and just cuts it in half, I mean, you're like, okay, well, I kind of needed that money for so and so project.
Yeah, maybe they're working on. I don't know how much TV you watch. I was in the hospital a lot lately, so I've seen a lot of TV. You know how they have all of these ads? You know how they have all of these ads for like adalimumab or like vinazorab or whatever, like all these things that end in ab, like these medicines? Have you seen these?
I've seen like commercials advertise like different types of medicines. Yeah.
So the kind of medicine that I'm talking about is called a biologic. And it's a fairly new thing. It's like 10 or maybe 20 years old. And they're extraordinarily effective for treating specific kinds of diseases. Like, they're really effective against, like, for autoimmune diseases. They can be really effective for cancers. But they're really highly specialized medicines that take a lot of money to research. And that's actually why they're so expensive too.
Yeah.
But like, these are medicines that can like cure serious diseases. They just cost a lot of money to research and develop. So if you just take away half their funding, maybe now Huntington's disease won't be cured, right? I can see where you're coming from, because like, for example, like they said that, I don't know how true it is, but I'm just going based on what I've heard. That I think it was Russia that found like a cure to like some cancer, and so I think that we're trying to do exactly the same thing. I don't know how true that is, but so I would always be skeptical. If a headline says that a cancer was cured and then 5 years later you still see people with that cancer, I would be very skeptical of that.
Right.
And this is just something I've learned over the years, is just that media will often report that like we have a cure for XYZ kind of cancer because they tested it in rats and it worked in rats, but then it doesn't translate necessarily to people, right? But I mean, the point is that like, medicine is the easiest thing to link to, but like there are other aspects of science that are also really important, like studying the thing to think about is studying the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It turns out knowing how the carbon dioxide moves around across the atmosphere over the course of a year can really significantly influence how you plant your crops, because obviously plants need carbon dioxide and you want to plant them at the time that is optimal for when the carbon dioxide is, in the right place at the right time so that the plants can get the carbon dioxide when they need it. So like all of this stuff is important. It's not just, you know, researching how frogs have sex or whatever, right?
There we go. My sound kind of is going in and out. So
Sorry about that. No, you're fine. But anyway, look, it sounds like we agree at least that it's important that we should be funding science, and it's important that we should, you know, if we want to know what's true about the world, we should probably listen to the people who study it. Now, that may or may not apply to MAGA, but I do think that I think that this has been at least productive. So is it fair if I let you go?
Well, I was going to ask
sure.
you one more thing before I go, and it was
That's
actually
totally
one
fine.
of the things that I mainly came up here for. What is your thoughts on like the you know, is it okay to say COVID?
Yeah, you can say COVID.
Oh, okay. The COVID vaccine. Like,
So-
for example, like,
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't believe that every vaccine is bad for you, right? Like, I've taken all the vaccine, like, for like, you know, that you're supposed to take. So I am for vaccines. It's just that, in my personal opinion, that the COVID vaccine was kind of rushed out, and so it kind of a lot of trust was not put into it, and so I wouldn't take it because of how rushed it was taken.
And look,
So
so
I was going to get your opinion on it.
I absolutely agree that it was rushed out. It definitely was rushed out. Like, I mean, and you can understand why it was rushed out. We had this disease which was spreading across the United States, spreading across the world. We didn't know how dangerous it was, and it was spreading really, really fast, and it could have been disastrous. I mean, it was really bad. I'm sure we agree on that. And so, you know, I think that somebody did a calculation, or somebody, you know, there were some meetings, and they're like, okay, do we take the risk of kind of skipping past some of the tests that we would normally have to do in hopes that we can get a vaccine out sooner so that we can, if it works, then we can save more people? Or is it not worth the risk? And somebody made the decision that it was worth the risk, right? And I mean, like, it was Donald Trump that made this decision. Now, and let me just show you a relevant chart. So this is a chart of people who died from COVID starting in October 9th, 2021, and going up until the end of August, or April 1st, 2023.
Right.
So this is shortly after the COVID vaccine was created. The COVID vaccine was created at the end of 2020, right? So this is starting about a year later. And what you can see in red are the deaths of people, this is in the United States, of people who are unvaccinated. And in green, you have the deaths of people who are vaccinated. So whether or not it was rushed, it clearly reduced the rate of death amongst people, right? Like, there's just far few people who died who were vaccinated than who were unvaccinated. Right. And so, like, maybe it was rushed, but it worked.
Right. I mean, because for me, I was extra careful around that time. Like, I kind of got out of the city because I live in the city. And so I knew that in cities, that you're going to have people that's going to be like, widespread. Of course, we got
higher density means higher transmission. Yeah.
Right. And so we had like hospitals really nearby, and I knew that this was going to be like a really infectious area. And so I kind of stayed with a friend that was kind of like in like the boonies, that really felt in the. So I took extra steps, even though I didn't take the shot, but I also took extra steps for me not being around sick people until it got resolved.
Sure.
I will of course wear masks and stuff like that, of course, but I took like extra steps so I wouldn't get infected, and so I wouldn't try to spread it to other people and whatnot. So it's kind of like, even though I probably fall like in like the category where, because they were trying to say that people that are overweight tend to pass away if they catch the COVID and whatnot. Which I've been around.
There's just higher risk factors, right?
Right, and I've been around like other what you call it, like swine flu and what's it, what was it called, the West Nile virus when that happened. There was other viruses that I had encountered, but never took that never really took a vaccine or did anything because I was away from all that.
Sure. So
I mean, extra cautious.
I appreciate your caution, and I think that I'm glad that you were on board with understanding that this is something to take seriously. There were a lot of people who there were a lot of people who just thought that it wasn't something to take seriously. That it wasn't real. It was a hoax. It was no worse than the flu, whatever. And so
Right.
I mean, it's just not true that it was it's not true that it wasn't dangerous, right? It obviously was dangerous. There are like a million
Right.
extra dead Americans that are attributable to COVID, right? So that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, look, I think that it's probably fair to say that if there wasn't a pandemic, the vaccine probably wouldn't have come out as quickly as it did. They definitely used emergency powers to try to kind of skip over some of the steps that are usually implemented for these kinds of things. Not to say that mRNA vaccines are brand new. They had been studied for decades. But this particular vaccine, typically, they have to, for vaccines in general, they have to go through a long series of steps, and they definitely skipped the line on a few of those. And, that's true. The question is whether or not that was a good idea. I think it was. I think that there was definitely a serious risk for, an even worse tragedy than we experienced in the first few years of the 2020s. And I think the bet paid off.
Didn't they have protocols that they was planning just in case something like this would happen? Didn't they have different
yeah, there was
planning on just in case
it was a
something
coronavirus. Yeah, and I think Donald Trump canceled it right before it happened, before COVID happened.
Of course.
I think these were put in place by Obama. So do you remember SARS?
Yes.
So SARS happened in the early 2000s, I think, maybe late 90s.
Because I was born in 1992, so I remember most of these newer diseases that came out or that kind of hurt people, let's put it like that.
So SARS was a thing in the 90s or maybe early 2000s or something like this, and there was kind of a task force, basically a task force that was evaluated or a part of the CDC, if I remember correctly, that was basically constructed to try to kind of predict another SARS virus and try to kind of preempt it and make sure that it's not serious if it does happen again, that we can handle it, that we have the tools to handle it. This was and COVID was a SARS virus. It was SARS-CoV-2, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So COVID was SARS-2 electric boogaloo, right? COVID was SARS. It was just a different kind.
I guess that makes sense where it said on some of the bottles or some of the cleaning products and the wipes and whatnot that why it said COVID or
SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah.
So so apparently, and I'm just double checking this because I want to make sure that I get the statements correct. So there is so it is the case that in 2018, really bad timing, the Trump administration fired the U.S. pandemic response team, which was implemented in response to SARS. And so had we had that, a few years later, maybe we would have had a better response, but we didn't.
And I would have to say that was a big L on Trump because
I mean, look, he couldn't have predicted the future, but
yeah, for years because I watched documentaries on where they make they was making plans for just in case epidemic were to fold out and in the United States, and how would it play out, and what was their go-to thing where they need to do and how to do it, how to set up and prepare, and just all kinds of different other stuff, right? They was
sure.
That was one of my favorite things that kind of watch. I was kind of shocked that the how things played out with COVID didn't really. It went badly. Like it
Yeah.
went extremely bad.
Yep.
Like a lot more people, for the plans that they had made or was going to make, a lot of people died or unalived. I mean, that shouldn't have been unalived, right?
Yeah.
Because we should have had something in place.
So I mean
we
like
prepared for it.
yeah, so look, this is one of those things where like clearly things were just being cut because they wanted to save money. And this thing was probably cut not because somebody knew that COVID was coming, but just because they thought that, oh, well, this is a waste of money. It turns out it wasn't. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Look, I think that you and I probably agree generally about COVID. It is, I mean, ultimately, it's everybody's decision whether they want to take a vaccine or not. I think that I appreciate that even though you didn't take the vaccine, you did take measures to try to keep yourself and keep your community safe. So that I don't think that you're a bad person. But Libs triggered by MAGA. It seems like nobody got triggered today, which I'm glad and I appreciate. But I'm gonna let you go. Is that fair?
Yeah, I had a good time on here. I want to give you a follow and everything. You're quite respectful, and you're actually the first. I don't know where you fall between the political spectrum, but you was actually enjoyable to talk to.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Have a good one, man.
All right, you too.
What a chap. What a delightful chap. I mean, we probably disagree on a lot of stuff, but look, we don't need to talk about, all that stuff. We can talk about the science and see if we agree. And it seems like we do. It seems like, he was open to that stuff. All right, let's read some super chats and then we'll bring on our next guest. From The Thinking Man with the £2, I was referring to mission to find the downed pilot. Well, yeah, no, I got that. I just didn't understand the whole thing about how it reflects why imperfections in brains make stuff work. From Tim Davidson with the $5, opinions are like buttholes. Everyone has them, most of them stink, and mine itches. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't tell me that. From Jack Fetter with the $5, how can we expect the children to learn when they can't even fit in the building? You got that right, Zoolander. From Neural Void with the £5, we now use hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs. Now they're damaging but less likely to degrade into toxic intermediates through UV electron excitation. Well, okay, that's good. From Chris RPG with the $2, big physics are in your back pocket, Blitz. Indeed they are. From Neural Void again with the £5, HFCs don't harm the ozone layer like older gases, but still drive warming. Trifluoromethane has 11,700 times the warming potential of CO2. Yeah, so CFCs were banned because of the impact on the ozone layer, not because anybody cared about greenhouse gases, right? From Logic with the $5, read Judith Curry, Climate Uncertainty and Risk, Rethinking Our Response, Anthem Environment and Sustainability Initiative. Let me put it on my list. Climate Uncertainty and Risk, Rethinking Our Response. Oh, it's a whole ass book. Live restricted? Why was my live restricted for misinformation? What? What do you mean? What do you mean? All right, we should end the live, and I'm gonna end the live on TikTok and bring it back up, just because I don't like that at all. So I'll restart it in a sec. TikTok will, or YouTube will continue on. We'll be back. All right, so I'll continue reading some super chats as we get more people to some people to filter in. Where were we? From Neural Void again with the £5. Oh, I already read this. I read that too. From Curtis Martin with the $10. You look beautiful today, sir. Well, so do you. So do you, buddy. So do you. And from Otto with the $2, call in stream with Professor Dave sometime, huh? I mean, if he wants to collaborate, I'm happy to. And from Binary Ghost with the $5, MAGA appears to have been hijacked and is now in the process of being scuttled by neocons like the Tea Party was. MAGA is the Tea Party, or rather it's the logical conclusion of the Tea Party. Let me drink some water, and then we will bring up our next guest. All right, let's bring up this person. Let's call them Zhu, maybe? Zhu?
Yo.
Zhu, how's it going? What should I call you?
X.
Okay, I'll call you X. All right, X. Are you MAGA?
Yeah.
Okay. I do have a few questions that I'd like to ask you just really quick, just to get these things out of the way. Is that fair? Yes or no, or unsure, or totally valid answers?
Sure.
So do you think that do you think that climate change exists? And if yes, do you think that humans are the main cause?
I don't think climate change exists.
Okay. Do you think that the vaccines that we typically administer to young children and infants are generally safe and effective? Okay.
Oh, no.
And do you think that humans evolved from non-human ancestors?
I don't believe in evolution. Sorry.
Okay. And what state do you live in?
I live in New York.
Okay, and what are the bordering states for New York?
What do you mean?
What states border New York?
I don't know. I just moved here 5 years ago.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I mean, who knows whether or not you're actually from New York, but it's not a big deal. So, you disagree that MAGA is anti-science?
Well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I believe that I believe that science is just mostly BS in my opinion.
Okay. Now, do you like the fact that MAGA agrees with you on that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I align with a lot of the
So you
views.
agree that MAGA is anti-science?
Yeah, but that's why I said it's more nuanced.
Well, I mean, it just sounds like you and I are in agreement. You just like the fact that they're anti-science, and I don't.
Well, I should try to convince you that science is just kind of BS. Why would you want to be for something that's BS?
Look, I'm not making a normative claim here. I'm just making a descriptive claim. I'm glad we agree that MAGA is anti-science. I don't know if there's anything else to talk to.
You believe the Earth is round?
Yeah, I do. Thanks for being here, Alex. So he agrees. MAGA is anti-science. Not so surprising. All right, let's bring up our next guest. Thank you guys all for coming back. I know that it's annoying to have to restart lives, but we do it for the memes or something. Let's talk to Didi. Didi, how's it going?
I'm good, and you?
I'm doing all right. Didi, do you consider yourself MAGA?
Yes.
Okay. What part of the world are you from, Didi?
I'm from Houston, Texas.
Okay. And just a few questions.
Can I start off with a question?
No, I have 3 questions to ask you first, and then we can get into whatever you want. Okay.
But am I obligated to answer them?
No, but then I'll kick you off.
But I want to ask a question first.
Okay, well,
So
them's not the rules. So the rules are you answer these 3 questions, and then we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I guess it's 4
No,
questions.
what do you mean
'cause
with
the first one-
anti-science?
Well, we'll get to that. But before we start, do you think that
No,
climate
I want
change
to
is
start
real?
things off with anti-science.
Do you think
What do
that
mean
climate
with
change
that?
is real? And if so, do you think that humans are the main cause?
I don't want to get into that. I want to know anti-science.
Thanks for being here,
What-
Didi. Look, there are rules. You just gotta, like, these are basic yes or no questions. If you don't want to answer them, you don't have to answer them, but then we're just not going to talk. Also, I don't think that you were American, so, you know. Not to be that guy. Let's see if TikTok user comes up. Yeah, he's from Texas, South Africa, right? All right, let's bring up Jared King.
Yep.
Jared, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Just a few questions that I'd like to ask if we could before we get started. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So first, would you consider yourself MAGA?
No.
Okay. Do you consider yourself conservative, independent?
Middle of the road. Independent, yeah.
Okay. Independent, right, I know how to spell. Do you think that humans are the main cause of climate change, if you think climate change exists at all?
I will say yes, but I am a scientist that works on climate, so I will say with some caveats, but yes.
Okay. Do you think that the vaccines that we typically administer to children are generally safe and effective?
Generally, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think that humans evolved from non-human ancestors?
From non-human ancestors?
Mm-hmm.
I believe in evolution, if that's what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah,
Like
specifically human evolution is what I'm asking about.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so you said you're an independent. It sounds like you want to come up and talk about MAGA being anti-science, though. So do you think that MAGA is not anti-science? Do you think that they're pro-science, neutral?
I think there's a lot of caveats to that, right? Like, so if we're scrolling on TikTok here, we see the extremes of like the stupidity on each side, like being like, how could somebody think something like that? Rather that's right or left, right? And then we think one side's stupid, the other side's stupid. I think a lot of policies that the Republican Party brings up are kind of anti-science in a way that they don't fund the science they don't care about, like specifically environmental or climate, which is directly what I deal with.
Medical science.
Yeah, sure.
Psychological psychological science.
I don't have enough to speak on medical science, so maybe I don't know.
Biological science. There's a lot. I could give you lists.
Like for example, I'll use like very just to me evidence, right? So like my parents, super MAGA, I would say. I don't agree with them on most things, but of course, they're my parents. I love the hell out of them.
Sure.
But I would never call them anti-science. Like their son's I'm a senior level scientist. They love hearing about all the stuff I do. They're not like balk at climate when I talk about it. They're actually quite interested in it, and I don't find anybody that ever really does. Like I have tons of friends that are also I think they would consider themselves MAGA, that hear me talk about the science that I do, and they're very interested in it. They don't sit there and espouse anti-climate or anti-science stuff. I think a lot of that gets really heavily just interpreted wrong, because what we see from the public is generally on our phones, which these things are meant to make us kind of it's like clickbaity stuff. It's supposed to jump out at you, otherwise you're not going to watch it. If it's some guy being like, oh yeah, I support Donald Trump, yeah, I think climate change is something we should listen to, like who's going to listen to that? Nobody cares. Like move on. Well, so I think it's a little bit of hype on the internet, really, more than anything.
So what is the case is, and I can just show you this, there's data on this, of course there is.
I love data. Let's see it.
All right, let's see it. So this is a study that was, I can go show you the authors if you want. The authors and where it was published. It was published in Nature Communications, which, I'm sure that that's a good journal. It's a good place to publish. So it's just one of the things, it's studying a lot of things, but one of the things that it's studying is conservative versus liberal ideology, and then, belief on climate change. And so there's an important chart that, if I can find it, it is, well, that's a pretty good summary, but I was looking for this one here. So if you look at this chart on the left, you have self-identified political ideology. Scaled, of course, it's not just either liberal or conservative. They use the sliding scale, which is how you can get the data in the middle. And so you can just look at which, you can look at the correlation between conservative leaning beliefs and being less likely to believe that climate change exists, right? And there's a very obvious correlation here. The more conservative you are, the less likely you are to think that climate change is real. And so I mean, it may very well be the case that 60%, let's say, I'm pulling this number out of my ass, let's say 60% of conservatives in the United States think that climate change is real. Well, what's going on there that it's 60% instead of 90% amongst liberals? Right?
Yeah, I mean, one, we're looking at an epidemiological study that you just pulled up, and those are, I'm not going to say they're
epidemiology. This isn't an epidemiology paper.
Or maybe, I'm sorry, I get a little nervous when I'm.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah. What is it when you study groups of people? Is it
sociology?
Yeah. Anyway, those types of research, I'm not going to say they're BS by any stretch. They're very good indicators of stuff, but there's a lot of issues when we want to look at like what questions were they asking them, what demographics, what was the spread of man versus woman versus the right side of the country versus the left side of whatever it may be. There's a lot of things that we want to look at, and that's a respectable journal. So I'm not going to say that that's not accurate, but anyway, when we look into that type of data, we got to be careful about understanding it. Just like how like statistics is very easy, like numbers are very easy to adjust to make your point of view seem correct. Like you can say something about some sort of statistical fact that really, if you get into it, is not as statistically significant as they try to say it is.
So that would be a fair plausible criticism if this was like the lone study, but it's just not. Like this is like this is across like every single study that's ever been conducted to investigate the relationship between political ideology and belief that climate change is real. It's overwhelmingly the case that people who are further right tend to be less likely to think that climate change is real.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
I mean, of course it is. Like we know, like we can see this in our society, right? And so there's just something happening there. Now, when I say that MAGA is anti-science, what I don't mean that every single person affiliated with MAGA rejects every single scientific consensus. That's not the claim here. The claim here is that as a movement, it has certain features that I think are reasonably called anti-science. So for example, as a movement, it is far more likely compared to other political ideologies to reject or delegitimize mainstream scientific consensuses across multiple domains, by the way, not just one. And it also, as a movement, seeks to undermine the institutions that produce scientific knowledge. And I think that if you can say a movement has fits both those criteria, it's fair to call it anti-science.
I get exactly where you're coming at. I just feel like that drives a little bit more of a division than is actually realistic in actual execution in the real world of people that you meet. I think that, the studies that we look at, yes, the farther right you go, maybe the less mainstream science you believe. And that probably, I don't mean to sound disparaging, but realistically, I think a lot of those numbers come from a lack of education.
Right?
I
mean, that's true. And MAGA also, as an ideological movement, is interested in defunding our education.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So like this is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. And when you say, in my experience, when I deal with environment and climate, I'm a geophysicist, but I'm really more of an environmental geologist. I deal with carbon sequestration and various different shit like that nowadays, but I've done tons of different stuff. But recently the administration basically stripped the Council on Environmental Quality's authority. But what they don't understand in that entire process is that now every single other agency still has to abide by all the regulations. They just don't have an overarching, like top level, I guess you could say, like that has a framework for how you're supposed to meet these regulatory compliance. Now it's every individual one. So now it just opens it up to even more litigation and all this other bullshit. So yes, it's kind of all counterintuitive. They think they're saving money by trying to defund or limit these these like environment or whatever in my case. But really what they do is open up a can of worms. They don't understand what they're doing. And
so you're most I guess exposed to this via climate, but it's not just climate, right? There's also all this stuff about vaccines and autism, right? Like that's certainly not in alignment with scientific consensus. There's all of this stuff about like evolution. You can even control for religiosity, and you can see that again, even controlling for the religious beliefs of an individual, conservative people are less likely to accept that evolution is true. You can look at basically the entire field of psychology is rejected by large swaths of the conservative right in the United States. So it just seems like that at least as far as MAGA is concerned, which we can call kind of like a social version, like a social conservatism in the United States or something like that. It seems like that the only science that they'll accept as an ideology is concerned, like, if you looked at the MAGA rulebook, what it would accept, it would be the stuff that's politically convenient.
Correct. But I think you could say that on both sides, right? Like you see this, like, again, I know I go back to environment because that's where I'm at, but like in the first Trump administration, you saw crazy shifts in environment, not allowing climate and NEPA evaluations, not allowing cumulative impacts, tons of different stuff like this. And then going into the Biden administration, well, guess what? Nothing changed. They didn't go, oh, well, I mean, I'm not going to say no regulation, but for everything I work with, nothing changed. So they went, you know, they play this big game like, oh, we're for the environment or we're for science or whatever. But once they kind of reverted back, they didn't fix this situation. They didn't go, well, everything that the Trump administration did, we're going to bring it back to the old standards and allow all this, you know, the proper science to be done here. They didn't do anything. So, I mean, the blame is on both sides, honestly, at least from my perspective and what I've dealt with.
So surely you agree that just because Biden didn't fix everything, that it's not fair to say that the person who caused the degradation of our institutions is just as bad as the person who failed to fix all of them.
I don't know if I would put any hierarchy on it. All I'm saying is that, you know, if they claim that the things that the Trump did in the first administration were super detrimental to environment, including the NEPA evaluation, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, which is something that is performed on any time a federal government action is taken, especially if it has potential human or environmental impacts. It'd be everything, really. They took out our ability to analyze greenhouse gas emissions.
The Trump administration or the Biden administration?
The Trump administration did. Climate impacts, cumulative impacts. I could go on and on about that, blah, blah, blah. The Biden administration didn't fix anything. And it would not have taken them, but I mean, all their EPA administrator had to do is basically revert back. This is not a difficult task. I mean, so why didn't they do that? Because it's also good for their party too, because they see the economy. They also understand that there's a way to push the blame off onto somebody else and act like they're the innocent ones in the whole situation.
Sure. So you could say, I mean, look, if you want to make the claim that like the Democrats are like, you know, not doing what they claim to believe in, like you could make that claim. But I think that it's interesting. Like the example that I have of, you know, it's perhaps a classic example of, you know, the kind of progressives in the United States changing their views to account for the science, not just do what's politically convenient, but changing their views is, how old are you? You said you're a senior scientist. You've got to be in your 40s at least, right?
I'm 38.
Okay. So, well, congrats. If you're a senior scientist at 38, that's pretty impressive. Anyway.
Worked really hard, thank you.
So do you remember the whole like hooked on phonics, like the way that we used to teach reading? Now, in the early 2000s, I want to say, I don't know when this switch happened. It happened after I learned how to read, of course. There was a change, a drive towards this like whole word reading. I don't remember what it was called, balanced literacy, which kind of de-stressed learning to like sound things out and rather stressed learning whole words at a time. Like recognizing the entire symbol of the word rather than like learning how to pronounce each word, each letter, and then combining them. So there was some degree of scientific evidence, at least, you know, in the, say, the early 2000s or something like this, that this was something that could be beneficial, could be better than kind of phonics-based learning to read. And then data came out that actually indicated that it's definitely not. Phonics is way, way better, way, way more effective than this whole word reading method. And now progressives have changed their tune on it because the data came out in the other direction, that actually we should go back to teaching to read based on phonics. And so it seems like it's not often that political ideologies are so closely aligned with what the outcome of a result of a scientific investigation is. But this is an example of progressives actually making this change and going where the science is, even if it's politically inconvenient, even if it's a political change that they have to make. So, and you know, honestly, I can't think of a single example of conservatives doing this. Conservatives adjusting their like political policy to account for the updated science.
Well, I'm sure if I sat there and thought about it, I could think of a thing or two. But I say what I think the conservatives, I will give them credit for, is oftentimes they do align with the left and with when it comes to, and I don't want to be too overstate my stance here, but when it comes to conservation, I know there's a lot of people that could care less, you know, if there's elk running around Colorado or if there's, you know, wolves in Alaska or whatever, but there are a lot of people on the conservative side that would be very much for like federal lands, public lands, conservation. I think during like the transcendental movement of the late 1800s and moving into the early 1900s, people that you would consider to be, by today's standards, conservatives, you know, put aside a ton of land. They started, you know, conservation. You know, we have the Marine Mammal Protection Act. We have the bird. What's the bird treaty? I'm skipping it right now because I'm a little nervous. But oh, damn it. It's an international treaty on Migratory Bird Protection Act. Sorry, but it's also a treaty. Things like that were implemented by people that by today's standard, you would say conservative. So I think in that sense, it's not a zero sum game.
Right,
there are
well,
some.
But look, conservatives haven't changed their view on that in 100+ years, right?
Right. Well, yeah, to a degree, but I would say it's the conservatives right now that are actually, well, like you could look up the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, RAWA. They're the ones spearheading trying to actually fund the ESA, the Endangered Species Act, which is quite counterintuitive considering the current administration tried to cancel that. But there are people within the conservative movement actually trying to fund this and have been for, hell, I think that piece of legislation has been in there for almost a decade trying to get passed. And it's generally bipartisan, but headed up by conservatives out of Texas, I believe, to fund the ESA, to fund national park infrastructure, et cetera.
This isn't really an example of them like changing their stance when the science changes, right?
Well, I think that there is some level of, well, I guess that's fair. You could argue that point, right? But understanding that there's, you know, the Endangered Species Act, why that's around, which is based on science, critical habitat, population dynamics, all these different things. And them understanding that, yes, we've put these regulations in place to try to safeguard these things. And it seems to be that the conservatives are the ones that are pushing for, you know, specifically with RAWA, I would say.
What's the act called?
Pushing for that. It's called, well, we refer to it as RAWA, but it's the Recovering America's Wildlife Act.
I just haven't heard of this.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate because I would say you're in the vast majority of most people that haven't heard of it. But it is, we've been trying to pass it for quite a lot of years now. So the Endangered Species Act, we really like, I think people think that we fund a lot of conservation with tax dollars. We don't. So
it was introduced so I just did some Googling. In the 118th Congress, which was 2023 to 2024, the Senate version was introduced bipartisanly by a pair of co-sponsors, one of whom was a Democrat and the other was a Republican.
Yeah, that's what fact, but if you look at it, I believe it was written by that guy out of Texas.
The bill passed in the House in 2022 with 152 Democrats and 42 Republicans.
Maybe I'm mistaken on this, but I'm pretty sure that was drafted by a Republican out of Texas.
Are you talking about Tom Tillis from North Carolina?
I apologize. I don't remember every bit of that offhand. I remember that at the time it seemed to be spearheaded by conservative. I could be incorrect about that one specifically.
Well, I mean, you could be right.
I believe it came because I remember watching a guy out of Texas who was the one that was the main guy trying to push for this. He was, I believe, I don't know if he was a senator or a congressman, but something like that.
So it was originally pushed. I guess versions of the legislation were proposed since at least 2016. I can't read this article because it's behind a paywall. Apparently, in the House of Representatives, the bill was first introduced by the lead sponsor, Debbie Dingell, who was a Democrat from Michigan. And then there was the lead Republican sponsor was Jeff Fortenberry, who resigned from the House in 2022. And then it was passed. And then the sponsors in the Senate were bipartisan.
I know it's a major bipartisan deal. I thought it was spearheaded by a conservative movement, which again, I have no dog in that race, whether it was conservative or libertarian. Or liberal. I think it's a great piece of legislation that needs to be passed. But nonetheless, I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that, but
I just can't see that. I mean, they tried to pass it and put it
in like omnibus bills, but like every time it gets thrown out, and we have no idea why.
I mean, I guess it never passed the full Senate and therefore expired at the end of the congressional term. So, I mean, but anyway, this is all to say, like, it seems
we're on a tangent.
Very far tangent, which is fine. It just seems like that when we look at politically inconvenient scientific facts about the world, right? It seems like progressives are more likely to change their view to fit it accordingly than conservatives are. And it seems like that if you just take the sum total of all scientific facts of the world, it seems like more of them are aligned with, or the progressives are more likely to agree with more of them than conservatives are. Now, whether that's causative because progressives are more likely to change their mind and become in line with the science and adjust their policies accordingly, or whether if it's just because, the facts of the world lend themselves to a more progressive ideology, that's a question to be decided. But surely you agree with me on this, that as far as like the major facts about the world, there's going to be, if you look on balance, conservatives are less likely to agree with those major facts about the world that we, derived from scientific examinations.
Yeah, I would agree with you that, but based on general like population dynamics, yes. The more right you are, the less likely you are to align with general scientific consensus. Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think there's also, again, not to be disparaging, because there's plenty of people that are on the right that have high levels of education. I don't mean that, but it's also, I think the more the progressive, the liberal end of the spectrum often goes towards education, where the other end of the spectrum often goes towards like the trades or whatever that you may be, right? So you have a little bit of a split on just sociological differences.
Yeah, of course. And so I'm not making the claim that somehow MAGA causes you to be anti-science. The claim here is merely that like the people who are MAGA are aligning with MAGA because it's in agreement with the psychology that they already have, right? And if they grew up with a poor education because they grew up in a state that, didn't prioritize education and, they didn't prioritize, learning about the world and things like this, then of course you're going to end up holding these kind of anti-scientific views. It's not so surprising. And that would be an unfortunate sociological phenomenon if it weren't the case that that group of people elected an administration that is now taking anti-scientific actions that is actually harming the scientific institutions in this country, right? I mean, like, just look at the NSF. The NSF is like the poster child of like, this is where a lot of our scientific funding comes from, and they want to cut it in half. It's crazy.
It is crazy. I will say also with that, I mean, it is crazy, but also there is a lot of inefficiency in scientific funding. Like, for example, I know I'm taking some of your time, so I'll do this real quick.
You're fine.
But I work in remote Alaska a lot. I live up in Alaska. I work at remote Alaska. I was doing an environmental geologist job, or senior geologist job, running this project, digging up basically contamination all over the place that the Army left in the location.
Sure.
They give us a certain type of funding. We go out, and it costs millions and millions and millions of dollars to do this stuff, to be clear, especially because of how logistics are very difficult. We get out there, we find out that there's a significantly more contamination deeper down than they understood during our site investigations. And we go, hey, like, we're out here, give us, an equitable adjustment to take care of this stuff, and we'll get it out of here now for a fraction of the cost of you guys coming back out later. Nope, we're not going to do that. Do you know how many tens of millions of dollars extra it costs those people to send us back out there to do all the science that we have to do all the cleanup that we have to do, instead of just giving us the funding right then and there to clean it while we're on the spot? So I run into a lot of different things like that. There are a lot of inefficiencies in government when it comes to budget or for science, whatever it be. Now, I guess you're probably talking more on the research side, but I'm talking more on the applied science side.
So the National Science Foundation, if I understand correctly, is that a huge chunk of their budget basically goes towards giving grants to like research scientists, right? To universities generally, or to organize conferences, or to individual researchers to fund their labs or whatever it might be. And so like, sure, I mean, like, as in all human endeavors, there are going to be inefficiencies. Like maybe the scientist could have done, maybe the lab could have done with one fewer grad student, and they could have achieved the same thing. But generally speaking, it seems like if you're going to cut the budget in half, then either you're funding half as many labs, or your labs are doing half as good or half as much science, right? There's no, I don't think that there's any reasonable way that you could say, oh well, we're going to be able to produce the same amount and the same quality of science with half a budget from the NSF.
No, not at all. I mean, splitting that type of funding in half, or even by marginal points at all, is really unacceptable. But there's obviously inefficiencies in a lot of that stuff. So I would say more oversight on and like audit systems versus like cutting it. You know what I mean? So that you can actually make that money stretch a little longer.
So
you know, if you get 10 different projects of funding that, and they have significant inefficiencies in them that you could reduce by having audits, then you could fund more rather than like, hey, let's cut the budget, try to find inefficiencies and hopefully save money. We could basically make our money stretch with a better system like that.
So I would agree, and you know that seems reasonable. Give more funding to the NSF and put some of that funding towards like better auditing processes, not to reduce the amount of grants that are given, but to evaluate which grants are more effective.
Right.
But that's also not what they were doing. There was in particular, and this was a big deal. I'm sure you heard about this last year. Basically, somebody at the NSF, and we don't know who, or you know, a team of whoever, was just going through grants and looking for anything that says diversity in it. And if it has diversity in the grant, then it's cut.
Yeah.
But like diversity doesn't only have to do with like diversity as used in a political sense, right?
Yeah.
Like there's other uses of the word, like a diversity of a biological population of bacteria, like that would have been cut. Right. So they're not auditing anything. They're not being careful. In fact, arguably they're being less careful than they used to be. So
yeah, that's fair enough.
They're being careless.
Yeah,
and
putting
they're harming our
institutions. To do audits is really unfortunate as well. You'd have to have a third party really do this type of situation, like what we're talking about.
Sure. So look, all I'm saying is that it seems like sociologically, the people who align themselves with MAGA tend to be less willing to agree with the scientific consensus, and the people who are in charge of MAGA tend to damage our ability to conduct scientific research in this country. And you know, as far as I'm concerned, that makes the movement anti-science. Like, I don't know what else you would call it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to necessarily disagree with you on that, but I would just caution. I think the main reason I came out is because I heard you talk about climate, and I could talk all day about that. But also, I would just also caution anybody listening, just, you know, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but just in general, people don't just think that because somebody has, you know, a MAGA hat on or supports Trump that they're anti whatever you might think, anti-science, anti-climate, whatever. Because people are people, and they don't always have the same alignment with a political party or ideology. They might have their own opinions. So I would just caution that when you're dealing with people in the public, or just thinking about groups of people as well. Not everybody's stupid.
So I'm generally with you that we shouldn't generalize people based off of their you know, how they carry themselves. I think that you could probably pretty quickly in a conversation with somebody figure out their views on these things just by talking with them. So there's no reason not to. But look, I'm going to let you go and see if there's some more opposition coming on. But thanks for being here.
Great to talk to you, bud. Thanks.
Take care. All right. Should we bring up Raziel? I feel like I know who Raziel is. I feel like I know that name. Raziel, how's it going?
What's up?
Raziel, have we spoken before?
I don't know.
Do you happen to know Q-Top?
No.
Okay, I thought that I thought that your name rang a bell with regard to a guy named Q-Top. Anyway, are you MAGA?
Yes.
Okay, do you mind if I ask you just a few quick questions? They're just simple yes, no, or unsure questions, and then we can get into the meat of it. So first, do you think that climate change is real? And if so, do you think that humans are the main cause?
Yeah, I think it's real, but not humans being the main cause.
Okay. Do you think that the vaccines that we typically give to children are generally safe and effective?
No.
Okay. And just to be clear, I'm talking about like the measles, mumps, rubella vaccines, the JDAP vaccine, these ones.
Yeah, none of it.
Okay. And do you think that humans evolved from non-human ancestors?
No.
Okay. All right. So the background here says MAGA is anti-science. I can explain what I mean by that. If that would be helpful for you, or if there's something specific that you want to talk about, we can talk about that too.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I mean by anti-science is kind of two things. I'm talking about the political movement, by the way, as a whole. I'm not talking about individuals. So what I mean is that if the political movement, which is characterized by the kind of like the average of the people and then also the leaders of the movement, if that political movement rejects mainstream scientific consensus across multiple independent domains, and it undermines the institutions that we use to produce scientific knowledge, I would say that that political movement is anti-science. Is that a fair definition?
I mean, I wouldn't agree with it, but we can go with it.
Which part? I mean, I just don't want to be using a definition that you don't think is reasonable. So which part do you think should be adjusted?
I just don't think you can be like anti-science.
Like, you don't think that's possible?
Like, I don't think science consensus is a thing.
You don't think it's possible to be anti-science?
No, I think that's a part of scientism, but not science. So maybe like what you mean is anti-scientism?
Well, so what I mean is, so when I'm referring to science, I'm not referring to just the scientific method. I'm referring to the scientific community, the scientific institutions, the findings, or the scientific knowledge base that we've established over the last 100+ years. That's what I'm referring to. I'm not just solely referring to the scientific method that you learned in 5th grade.
Yeah, this consensus thing is what I would deny.
Okay, so you don't think that scientific consensus is valuable?
No.
Okay.
Like, I don't think it makes something true. So.
Well, I didn't say it does. Do you
Maybe
think
it's
that?
valuable, but
Do you think that?
Let's go with valuable.
Suppose that there is a scientific consensus about, I don't know, birds, a specific kind of bird. There's a scientific consensus that this specific kind of bird is a keystone species for this specific, I don't know, environment, or this specific environment or something, right? Do you think that the fact that there is a scientific consensus about that thing makes it more likely that it's true, less likely that it's true, or it doesn't affect whether or not it doesn't affect the probability that it's true?
What would you mean by scientific consensus, though? Like everyone agrees?
No, just an overwhelming majority agrees.
So what percent?
More than, say, 80%.
Okay, more than 80. Okay. Sure, let's go with it.
But so would you say, I mean, that doesn't answer my question. My question is, suppose that there is that scientific consensus. Do you think that,
no.
Okay, so you don't think that the existence of that scientific consensus makes it more plausible or more likely that it's true?
Yes.
Okay. How do you come to knowledge about things that you are not an expert on? Or how do you come to beliefs, rather?
I wouldn't have a belief about something I'm not, like I haven't looked into myself.
Well, I mean, you can look into things and still not be an expert on them, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't be an expert, though.
Right. So, like, I can have, for example, I can look into climate change. That doesn't make me an expert on climate change or an expert on the climate, right?
Yeah, but you wouldn't arrive at truth that way, right?
So, would you say that I don't understand the question. I mean, if you look into something, you're right. You don't necessarily arrive at truth.
Arrive at truth, then what's the point?
Well, the point is to try to form your beliefs. I hope that you agree with me here. The point is to try to form your beliefs in a way that are most likely, that leads you to be correct most of the time, as frequently as possible, right? Because we want to believe true things. You there?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sure, but I did want to ask a question too.
Sure, we can go down that. I just want to, you just didn't answer my question because I don't think you heard it. So yes. Surely we agree that you should form beliefs using a method that leads your beliefs to be correct as frequently as possible, right?
Sure.
So do you think that if you're not an expert on something, like if I'm not an expert on birds, do you think that I should form beliefs about birds, especially if those beliefs are in direct contradiction with the majority beliefs about specific kinds of birds amongst the people who study those birds?
Sure, but I think skepticism is a major part of science. When you're talking about consensus, that's actually anti-science to talk about consensus. Because, you know, there was a consensus that the Earth was the center of the universe till that consensus was broken. But people were in the minority before that, right?
Well, so I'm not saying that scientific consensus can't be wrong.
Galileo, you would have been the guy saying, look, there's consensus about the Earth being at the center.
So I'm not saying that consensus can't be wrong. What I'm saying is that if you were a betting man and you were trying to figure...
That's my contention, is consensus is not a right thing.
Okay, so my contention, and maybe we're just talking past each other, my contention is that if I'm not an expert on something, if I don't know much about it, if I've only cursorily looked into something, maybe by Googling it, maybe by doing some reading on Wikipedia, whatever, it seems like the most likely way, the best way that I could probably form a belief is just by going and looking at what the experts in the field all agree on and believing that. It seems like it's going to be right way more often than anything else I could do.
Sure, but you're going and saying that MAGA's anti-science because we don't believe in these things. But that wouldn't make us anti-science. It just makes us skeptics about certain things that science is presenting, right?
So
how would that be anti-science?
Well, it's bad epistemology, right?
But when the left does it,
I'm not making any comments about the left. Maybe the left is anti-science too.
no, they definitely are, right?
Okay, I mean that's cool. It's just not related. It's just not really the
they
topic,
don't,
right?
So they don't believe in GMO science. They don't believe in nuclear science.
That's
believe
fine.
in
It's just not the topic.
They don't believe in biology lately, actually. So
just not the topic. It sounds like you. It sounds like you really want to avoid talking about MAGA denying science.
Denied by the left.
Okay, you can. If you want to talk about how the left is anti-science, you can run a live stream about that. That's not what the topic is.
Are you gonna cry about it?
Well, it's just not the topic of the live stream.
Well, that's the question I wanted to ask you, though.
Okay, you wanted to ask me a question that's unrelated to the live stream?
Oh, so you can't answer it?
I don't even know what the question
you're
is.
A hypocrite.
I don't even know what the question is. It's just if it's about the left, then it doesn't seem like it's
By
on
your
topic.
definition, the left is anti-science.
Well, by my definition, so my definition, I'll repeat it again. That's two parts. One, a political movement is anti-science if it systematically rejects or delegitimizes mainstream scientific consensus across multiple independent domains. And two, undermines the institutions and procedures that produce that scientific knowledge. So you could even make a point.
Of both those points.
So can you give me an example of the left undermining undermining scientific institutions that produce scientific knowledge?
Yeah, so the nuclear industry, the gas industry, gas science.
Industries aren't institutions.
No, nuclear science is a scientific field.
So you're just not acknowledging what the second
In fact,
criteria is about?
The left was anti-vaccine during the hippie movement.
So you're just not addressing what the second criteria is? The second criteria is about undermining institutions.
You know, the left came up with vaccine skepticism, right?
So is the left undermining institutions that produce scientific knowledge?
Yes, because they don't trust,
the institution?
Like, for example, GMOs.
What's the institution?
GMOs. Healthcare?
Health isn't an institution.
Healthcare is an institution.
No, I want you to be specific. What institutions are we talking about here? Like the EPA? Like what are we doing?
GMOs. That would be the
what institution? What private institution? What three-letter agency? You know, what nonprofit organization? What are we talking about?
The GMOs?
So you don't have any explicit examples?
I can't remember which one it is. I could Google it.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Still wrong though.
I mean, because I think you're gonna have a hard time finding like the left. I don't even like the left in the United States is kind of a broad thing because there's the moderate liberals, and then there's like the actual proper socialist left, and then there's like kind of a whole spectrum between them. But that's neither here nor there. I think you're going to have a hard time finding any like, you know, institutions. No, I can't hear you when you're off the app. I think you're going to have a hard time finding any like policy decisions that are undermining those institutions. Okay, so the FCA and the EPA, you say?
Yeah.
Or the FDA rather. Okay, so have the left, whatever that means, have they
involved with GMOs too?
Wait, so what were the institutions that you brought up? I just misheard you.
EPA and what was it? Also, it says the USDA.
Okay, so can you give me examples of like
right there in the major?
Can you give me examples of the last time? Can you give me examples of the last time? Can you give me examples of the last time that the, you know, a presidential administration or like a large majority of, you know, Democrats in Congress or whatever have tried to like undermine these organizations and agencies?
The left has been undermining those agencies.
In what way?
For the last 20 years.
In what way?
Not passing funding for GMOs.
Not passing funding for GMOs? Is there a specific act that you have in mind?
No, I don't have to know the act.
So then how do you know that this happened?
Because the left has been opposing.
Who?
The left.
So the left loves the EPA. The left loves the FDA.
Love the EPA. They actually don't like certain things about it. So like when you were talking about how MAGA does it, where it's like politically expedient, that's what the left does as well.
What? That wasn't really a complete sentence. So can you give me an example of like some particular policy or some particular executive order or some particular? You can't give me any examples of any of this happening, can you?
I could Google it and you'd be wrong again.
Please Google it. Well, I wasn't wrong because you haven't given me an example of this happening.
You ready to be wrong again?
Yeah, please prove me wrong. Like some bill introduced by you know, some mainstream Democrat or something like that. That is like, we want to reduce whatever.
Okay, so look up the DARK Act.
D-A-R-K?
Yeah.
Okay, DARK Act. The Deny Americans the Right to Know Act refers to federal legislation, specifically Public Law 114-216, signed in 2016, that established national standards for GMO food labeling while preempting stricter state laws. It permitted companies to use digital codes instead of on-packed text to disclose bioengineered ingredients. Okay. Okay. So what is this law about?
Monsanto Protection Act.
So let's talk about this law. Okay. So what does this law do? Do you know?
Oh, sorry. It's about GMO labeling.
Okay. So do you think that it is anti-science to require GMO foods to be labeled as such?
Yeah, because it's kind of like when they label smoking, because there is a major stigma against GMOs, all perpetuated by the left. And so they want to stigmatize it, even though all the scientific consensus, like you were talking about, says that GMOs are safe.
So this law doesn't actually
stab you right now.
So all of this law, so it sounds like all this law does, and I'm just looking at the contents. Oh, actually, as it was originally the version as originally introduced contained no language to regulate bioengineered foods.
All right, so in the Monsanto Act, they actually opposed
we're still
on grounds of the GMO.
A bill entitled Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act of 2015 was received in the Senate and referred to the Committee on Agricultural Nutrition and Forestry, which resulted in the amendments to Public Law 114-216 now. This was done on July 7, 2016 to establish a National Bioengineered Food Disclosure Act, whereby bioengineered food, commonly referred to as genetically modified organisms, or GMO food, is defined as food that has been genetically engineered in a way that could not be obtained through conventional breeding or found in nature. Mitch McConnell introduced the Roberts GMO bill, named after Pat Roberts, who was then chair of the Committee on ANF, and Public Law 114-216 thereafter suffered through no less than 40 amendments over the course of 1 week. Mitch McConnell, famously the left?
No, he wasn't the only person that...
He introduced the Roberts GMO bill.
Yeah, but it was Democrats that voted for it.
Wait a minute, so...
Mitch McConnell is a rhino.
Mitch McConnell is like the most Republican.
No, he's not MAGA at all. I don't know where
he was instrumental in helping MAGA control the Supreme Court.
Do you think that MAGA is the same as conservative?
Do you think that Mitch McConnell is the left?
I don't think Mitch McConnell's MAGA.
I'm not making the claim that he is. You're saying the left did this.
Is there a MAGA hat?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about the left. You said that this was the left that did this. Mitch McConnell introduced this bill.
No, but Democrats voted for it. That's the point.
So did Republicans. Actually, I actually don't even know how it passed. Did it even pass? It was passed after previous attempts to introduce the National GMO Bill labeling bill had failed. It was fast-tracked without debate or committee. That was done by Mitch McConnell, by the way. A bill to reauthorize and amend the National Sea Grant College Program Act for other passes had nothing to do with food, installed after having passed the Senate. Hollowed out of its content, it was replaced by a bill to defund Planned Parenthood. This bill was then replaced with a bill creating to outlaw state-level GMO labeling and setting a voluntary GMO labeling bill. When this bill failed, the Senate 764 husk was used to rush through blah, 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 just in time for the Vermont GMO food labeling requirement would have been activated on July 1st. Did it even pass?
I don't know. I don't think it did.
Oh, no, it did pass. This is the Public Law 114-216 is a bill to reauthorize and amend the National Sea Grant College Program Act and for other purposes. So within the National Sea Grant College Program Act, which apparently was gutted of its GMO stuff, that thing passed. So like this is not even a
We could disagree
It's
about
not even
that,
a thing.
But then look at the Monsanto Protection Act.
Okay,
They
let's look at the
opposed it
Monsanto Protection Act.
completely
So you were
grounds
wrong
of
about this one, by the way.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, you were. You absolutely
No,
were, because
okay.
because it didn't do what the law that eventually ended up getting passed didn't do what you claimed it did. So you were wrong about that.
They opposed it on the grounds of GMO because they're anti-science.
It was introduced by Mitch McConnell.
The left is anti-GMO.
Do you know how many Democrats voted for it?
You don't have to take my word for it. You can just look it up.
Let's just go look this up. Let's just go look this up. Votes. Robert's GMO
You
bill.
realize that if MAGA or
so
Republicans were opposed to it,
so
it
hold on.
wouldn't
So
make your case, right? You just need a Democrat or some Democrats.
So this is really funny. So the bill was initially failed. The Roberts GMO bill initially failed because 8 Republicans said no, and only 3 Democrats said yes.
In what?
For the initial passage of the Roberts GMO bill.
The Monsanto Protection Act?
No, the Roberts GMO bill, the one introduced by Mitch McConnell. So fewer Democrats voted yes than Republicans who voted no.
But that's not in a whole House thing.
That was in the Senate. Yeah, that was in the full Senate.
No, the Senate has way more people voting than that.
No, there were more Republicans voted no than Democrats who voted yes. So 3 Democrats voted yes, 8 Republicans voted no, and then the rest voted along party lines.
Yeah.
So less Democrats voted yes than Republicans who voted no. So this was a Republican bill.
The left is still against GMOs.
This was a Republican bill. If leftists were against GMOs, then why didn't the Democrats vote for this?
Do you think the left is pro-GMO?
I think that I don't think that the left really cares about GMOs at this point. Maybe 30 years ago. Maybe 30 years ago this was the case, but I don't think that this is really a thing anymore. Okay, do you have data to support it otherwise?
Yes.
Okay, what's the data?
The Monsanto Protection Act.
All right, we're going to go look up the Monsanto Protection Act. So the Monsanto Protection Act is a different law. This is called the Farmer Assurance Provision. It refers to section 735, formerly section 733. I'm just reading off of Wikipedia. I can show you this. Here we go. A bill that was passed by the Senate on March 20th, 2013, and then signed into law as part of the Consolidated and Further Continuing Appropriations Act by 2013. This is the Monsanto Protection Act, is it not?
No, go on, but like Greenpeace literally fucking campaigns.
Do you think that Greenpeace is representative of the mainstream left?
Yes, it's all left.
So you're like high then.
No, do you think Greenpeace is a MAGA organization?
Greenpeace is not representative of the left.
It's all leftists.
Look, okay, so all of the Nazis in the United States are MAGA. That doesn't mean that MAGA is Nazis.
That's such a bad equivalency.
It's literally the equivalency that you're making.
No, it's not. Dude,
you're saying that because Greenpeace is left, that means that the left is, or that Greenpeace is representative of the left.
I can ask almost any leftist I know if they're pro-GMO, and they're gonna say no.
Ask me.
Vehemently.
Ask me.
You're just gonna make the opposite argument because you're an idiot. You're losing this debate.
If you think I'm losing, then you don't know how to read.
Okay. I'm sure your dumb supporters with low IQs think that you're winning.
You want actually? You know what? Why don't we take a poll of the chat? How about that?
I don't care about your chat, bro.
But I thought you said if you ask any leftist that this is what'll happen.
People that watch you on a daily basis because they have nothing better going on in their lives agree with you.
Oh, so I thought so it's not. So you can't ask any leftist? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm saying your audience is all leftist.
Okay. Well, yeah. So let's see. So we're gonna do a quick poll, a 1-minute poll. Okay. Give me a smiley face if you.
I don't give a shit. You were wrong.
Give me a smiley face if GMOs are if you are fine with GMOs. Give me a sad face if you are against GMOs, and only vote if you're on the left.
Liberals have never lied.
Give me a vote. Only vote if you're on the left. By the way.
Nobody cares about your stupid poll, dude.
So
leftists are all liars.
I mean, it just seems like your claim that you could ask any leftist and that you would get a certain answer. Well, it's just not true.
If I wasn't in these stupid live with your dumb brainwashed supporters and I asked the leftists, they would tell me they're against GMOs.
I don't think that that's true. I mean, you can just go to San Francisco and I can assure you that they sell. I can assure you that they sell GMO stuff in the supermarkets.
No, stop right now and Google it.
Oh, well, I'm gonna wait till the quick poll's over.
Okay, so you're not gonna Google it.
Oh, I mean, we can Google it in a second.
Google it.
We'll Google it in a second. Don't worry. So currently we have 122 votes for GMOs are fine and 14 votes for don't like GMOs.
Yeah, I already told you I don't give a shit about your fake poll.
Well, it's not a fake poll. I'm just asking. It's just a poll for
your stupid
the audience.
brainwashed supporters that are literally
okay.
like jerking around, going to support you no matter what.
Of course.
Because you're wrong about this.
Okay, so the poll has ended with 133 people who are fine with GMOs and 18 people who are not fine with GMOs.
I guess that means the left is pro-GMO. I guess
well,
we
at
should
least that they're fine with GMOs.
Did we inform the left?
Well, you're talking. You just got an answer from
people?
you just got an answer from 150 people on the left.
I got an answer from 650 brainwashed liars.
Oh, okay, I see. So when people tell you what they when people tell you when people tell you what they believe, they're lying.
People. We know leftists aren't honest people, but there's 14 of them.
Okay.
Or maybe they're MAGA in the comments.
Oh, okay.
So you got cooked on the GMO thing because you know.
Wait, do you think that I got cooked? So by the way, here we can look at the AA overview if you want. Anti-GMO sentiment is often associated with the It's often associated with the political left, frequently driven by concerns over environmental impact, industrial farming, and corporate control. While not universal, a significant segment of the left supports stricter regulations or labeling of GMOs, which some argue stems from a suspicion of biotechnology and corporate influence. Should we keep reading it? Well, should we keep reading? Sure. Key perspectives, environmental concerns. Many left-leaning arguments focus on ecological damage and the desire for sustainable, small-scale farming alternatives to genetically engineered crops. Anti-corporate sentiments. Opposition is frequently aimed at large agrochemical corporations, arguing that patenting seeds is ethically suspect. Scientific disagreements. Although mainstream science generally views GMOs as safe, many anti-GMO activists argue that these crops have long-term consequences. That would be an example of scientific being anti-science, by the way. Labeling support. The movement for mandatory labeling of GMO foods is a major, often left-led effort aimed at consumer transparency. A note on political nuance. We're just going to keep reading, by the way. Widespread concern, while often labeled a liberal issue, while often labeled a liberal issue, studies have shown that fear and suspicion regarding GMOs are widespread across the political spectrum. Waning opposition. Some data suggests that intense opposition is shifting as some people recognize the potential of GMOs to adapt to climate change. So it seems like that maybe this used to be an issue, but it's not really an issue solely on the left anymore. And we can go look at the studies if you want now.
No, it's still a majority issue on the left.
Do you have data that supports that? Because we can go pull up studies if you want.
Still is way above 50%, right?
Do you want to go look at the studies? Because we can go look at the studies if you want.
Decreasing. So if you're saying, oh, 90%.
Wait, do you want to go look at the studies? Why are you so afraid of the studies? Why are you so afraid of the studies?
85% of us believe it. That doesn't make a fucking difference. The
Why
majority
are you
still.
Why are you so afraid of the studies? Why don't we just go look at the studies?
No, you're coping very hard, my friend.
Do you have studies or no?
Dude, you literally just Googled it and got proven wrong in front of
your whole audience. So it seems like what the AI said is that this is often labeled as a liberal issue, but apparently it is widespread across the political spectrum, and that there is internal shifting. There is internal shifting of the political views
on the left
as a result of GMOs being able to adapt to climate change. So it seems like this may have been an issue 20 years ago.
You're just moving the goalposts. At
no,
first you said
I'm just talking about now.
Now you're saying we're kind of against GMOs, but it's changing.
No, you're having a hard time reading again.
It's just a bunch of coke. You're wrong. Just see the point.
You're having a hard time reading again. I understand that.
We still haven't moved on to nuclear. We still haven't moved on to genetic science.
So to be clear, it seems like you're having a hard time reading. But what we're talking about is now, right? Is it true now that the left is anti-GMO?
Yes.
Okay, where's the evidence of that?
The majority is still anti-GMO, like you said.
Do you have any evidence that supports that?
Yes.
Okay, what's the evidence?
Dude, you're coping so hard.
I just want the evidence. I can give you the evidence, by the way, that like that the right is far more likely to think that climate change is fake, that the right is far more likely to think that vaccines cause autism. I can give you evidence that I can give you evidence that says that the right is far more likely to reject evolution, far more likely to reject psychological science. Why can't you give me any evidence?
When Trump came up with the vaccine,
why can't you give me any evidence?
Back in like COVID.
Why can't you give me any evidence for your claims?
So was the left anti-science then?
Why can't yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Why can't you give me any evidence for your claim?
You're an idiot.
Oh, so you can't give any evidence for your claim, so you're just going to resort to.
I showed you that the left is.
No, your claim was about GMOs. I don't know if you remember this.
Science. I was still right about GMOs. You're just coping really hard.
I mean, you have a claim about GMOs.
An argument that it's slowly shifting.
You have a claim about GMOs, but you haven't presented any evidence. No, you haven't presented any evidence of this. I don't know if you know what evidence means.
You just Googled it.
So I'm actually looking for a study while we're having this conversation, because I can do two things while having a conversation with you, because it's that simple to do. Yeah, you need a study or at least some sort of survey. Yeah. Yeah, you need a study or some kind of survey. Absolutely, that's how we do science.
So I need to have a study memorized to bring to you on this debate.
Well, yeah, or you could go Google it if you want. You can go see if you can find one. Yeah, I did. You're right.
Yeah, I was right.
So you were right that I just Googled it. Yeah.
No, I'm right that GMOs are supported by the left. I mean, opposed by the left. That they're anti-GMO. And
that's probably true. That's probably true like 20 or 30 years ago. I don't know how true that is anymore.
They're still anti-nuclear science, aren't they?
I actually don't know if that's true anymore.
Oh, it definitely is.
It seems like your talking points are like 40 years out of date.
No. Do you see us rushing to build nuclear power plants?
Building nuclear power plants and being pro-nuclear energy are very different.
That make stupid solar panels that destroy the environment.
So to be clear, building nuclear power plants and being pro-nuclear energy are different. It turns out building nuclear power plants is hard and very expensive, so there are other reasons to be against building new nuclear power plants in certain areas, by the way.
No, they used to be way more expensive, so you might be like 40 years out of date.
No, I mean, okay, we could just Google how expensive it is to build a nuclear power plant.
How much do you think it costs to build solar panels, and what is the impact of the environment?
So I mean, we could, like, are we talking on a watt-for-watt basis, or what are we talking about here?
No, to power a city. Like,
well,
let's
so you want to talk about on a watt-for-watt basis then?
How many solar panels would you need to power Phoenix, Arizona?
We can just, do you want to just go look up the cost per watt for a solar panel versus nuclear?
Cost per watt? Sure.
Yeah, solar versus nuclear. We can just look this up. By the way, I'm actually quite fond of nuclear, but I actually think that solar panels have probably gotten cheaper, or at least they're commensurate with nuclear at the moment.
No, nuclear is way better than solar.
Okay, hold on. I'm looking for cost per watt.
So there's less impact on the environment.
Energy
sources. It's going to be cheaper long term because the solar panels break after 10 years.
There's a really good chart that I'm looking for.
They kill the wildlife, they kill the bees, they kill the animals. You need a lot of land to put solar panels on.
Okay, so this is US dollars per megawatt hour.
They only work when there's sunshine.
I don't actually see any. I don't see the new. Oh, here we go.
But yet the left still support solar panels.
So here's a chart. This chart is from 2025, and this is excluding tax subsidies. So here we have the cost per megawatt hour, which is a unit of energy for US nuclear is between 34 and 220 with that's the fully depreciated estimate. The low estimate is 141 and the high estimate is 220. And so, this is fully depreciated. So for solar photovoltaic, we have 38 to 78. So yeah, I mean, solar is just cheaper than nuclear at this point.
38 to, well, nuclear is 34.
That's the fully depreciated estimate.
Yeah, but you're going off
so the fully depreciated estimate is assuming the facility is running beyond the lifespan for which the building cost was apportioned.
Yeah, and we could totally do that.
That's for a nuclear power plant running beyond how long it was meant to run.
The logistics of like powering our grid off solar, it's literally
no, I mean
impossible.
you were just wrong. Can you admit that you were wrong about this?
No, I wasn't wrong.
Okay, well, I mean, we just saw that you were. I can pull up another one, and we can look at a similar comparison if you want.
You make fake, arbitrary goalposts that no one agreed to, and then you knock that down. You're just straw manning.
How is this a straw man?
I'm still right on the point that the left is opposed to nuclear, and that it's a totally safe.
Wait, so you made to be clear, you did make the claim that nuclear is cheaper than solar, right?
No, I said let's look it up.
Here we have another similar chart. So we have, at the minimum, solar is $24 per megawatt hour and up to $96 per megawatt hour at the utility scale.
It's not one I made, and it assumes
the nuclear is at its cheapest is $31 per megawatt hour, and that's the marginal cost for the lifetime extensions lower than for the lifetime extension. So okay, so I'm glad that we agreed that it's cheaper to run solar than it is to run nuclear. Now, do you want to go look at public approval? We're just going to look at public approval of nuclear energy by political party in the US. We can just Google this.
We can just Google this.
Yeah, we can, right?
Oh shit, were you wrong?
No, I'm just finding a study. It's from Pew.
Shit. He was wrong again, guys.
So here we have Pew. This is from 2020. This is from 2020. So this was, yeah, this is the April-May survey find. So here we have a chart saying, so we have the percent who favor expanding each of the following sources of energy.
Stupid mad supporters are spamming my messages.
So we have, so it seems like Republicans are majority not in favor of expanding wind turbine farms. Democrats are not in favor of expanding hydraulic fracking. They're not in favor of supporting offshore oil and gas drilling or coal mining. But the majority of Democrats, 52%, are in favor of expanding nuclear power plants.
Yeah, that's not a real poll.
This is Pew. Pew is one of the most well-respected polling institutions in the country.
Yeah, Pew. Okay.
Yeah. Pew is one of the most well-respected leftists. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you acknowledge that you were like completely demolished on that one?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you were, because the majority of Democrats are in favor of expanding nuclear power.
Not.
It's 52%.
Then they would have done it. They would have done
52%.
it when Biden was in power and when Obama was in power.
52%, my guy. That's the majority.
Why didn't they do that?
What? Wait, has Donald Trump built any new nuclear power plants?
No, because he likes
did he build any new nuclear power plants in his first term?
No.
Oh, okay. So then why didn't he do it if the Republicans are in favor of nuclear power plants?
Is he opposed to them?
I don't think so, but neither are the Democrats.
Okay, so your argument's fucking stupid, isn't it?
I never made the claim that Republicans are opposed to nuclear power.
Strawman things.
So I don't think you know what a straw man is. That's just not my claim. In fact, you actually just strawmanned me.
No, you fucking have been strawmanning me the entire time.
You just said
you can
that.
Set up
wait, you just. Okay, this is crazy.
You're like, oh, so
this is a crazy claim because you literally strawmanned me while calling me
a
straw man builder, right? Like you just made the claim that I said that Republicans were anti-nuclear somehow, when I never made that claim. I never made the claim that Republicans were anti-nuclear. You made the claim that Democrats were, and then I showed you a poll. And then I showed you a poll. Shut up for a second. I showed you a poll showing that, in fact, the majority of Democrats are pro-nuclear.
No, they're not.
I just showed you a poll.
One fake poll.
What, a fake poll? Okay, so now you're calling the evidence fake. Okay, well, it seems like you're anti-science then.
Poll. You think polls are scientific truth?
It's data.
It's not conclusive at all. One poll, definitely not.
Do you have any evidence that says otherwise?
That predict the elections.
Do you have any evidence? Hold on. Do you have any evidence that says otherwise?
Sure. I'll look them up.
Yeah, go find the poll, go find the survey or the data or whatever that shows that Democrats are anti-nuclear. Here we have Gallup. So apparently it's actually this is actually really interesting. This is a Gallup poll, by the way, another very highly respected polling institution. So American approval of use of nuclear energy has been pretty close to 50-50 since like at least the 90s. Republicans most supportive of nuclear power among party groups. That makes sense. So you have percentage of people who strongly or somewhat favor using nuclear energy as one source of electricity in the United States. So 60% of Republicans, 53% of independents, 39% of Democrats as of 2022. And so it looks like that it's, at least according to this poll, it looks like that only 39% strongly or somewhat favor using nuclear energy as one source of electricity in the US. Apparently Biden actually wanted to convince Americans.
Yeah, so you're showing,
apparently Biden actually wanted to convince Americans.
Under 50%.
Apparently Biden actually wanted to convince Americans that nuclear power needs to be part of the green energy agenda.
And he didn't do it?
Well, I mean, he has to convince the Americans and convince Congress.
Did he even try? I don't remember that.
Do you want to go look it up?
Sure.
Okay, we can go check. Apparently support for nuclear energy.
Any legislation?
We can go look that up in a second. Apparently support for nuclear energy also differs sharply by gender. Okay, we can go look up. We'll go look up. Did Biden support any legislation in favor of nuclear power? I just don't know off the top of my head. Okay, so Biden signed the Bipartisan Advance Act into law in July of 2024. which aims to speed up the licensing and deployment of next-generation nuclear reactors. At least according to the AI, yes, he did. Want to admit that you lost on that one too?
I'll admit I was wrong about the.
Okay. Oh, guest violation warning. A guest in your live has violated a hate speech and hateful behavior policy. Repeated violations by your guest may lead to restrictions of your on your access to multi-guest live features. He was removed. Sorry, guys. It was a good one, but he clearly wasn't here in good faith anyway. Like, he didn't even want to talk about the topic. He was just like, yeah, but the left is also anti-science. Like, the left can be anti-science about some things. I'm sure that they have been historically. That doesn't mean that they're anti-science now, and it doesn't mean that MAGA is not anti-science. Anyway, that was that. I don't know why it was removed for hate speech. I mean, you know, he was speaking and I did hate it, but I don't know why he was removed for hate speech. Anyway, let's read some super chats. Actually, let me drink some water first. Yeah, don't report people. It hurts it hurts me. Yeah, the whole thing about nuclear is that, like, in the 80s, we had a lot of nuclear disasters, and like that sticks with you, right? Like when you hear about Chernobyl, that's scary. When you hear about what is it, 3 Mile Island, like that's scary. And so, like, if you're an old person who was alive for those things, it's very easy to remember and to think, yeah, I don't know if I trust it. And I imagine that's probably where a lot of it's coming from. I don't think that like young people are generally anti-nuclear at all. But anyway, let us read some super chats. But we could look up data on that. From Saint Diluted with the $5, NIH has a source documenting mRNA vax research back decades. Not rushed, posted it in your Discord. Well, look, so I'm not saying that the mRNA vaccine research was rushed. I'm saying that specific vaccine. My understanding, and I could be misremembering, but my understanding is that there were some FDA requirements to get a vaccine ready for the general public that were skipped over. Some like specific types of trials and so on that were skipped over because of an emergency, like an emergency powers kind of thing. I'm not talking about mRNA vaccine in general. I'm talking about those specific vaccines for widespread approval by the FDA, right? From Miko Makopo with the 10 pounds, social science shows near all European monarchies score higher on the democratic index than the US. We are MAGA, Make America Great Britain's again. Just a bit of fun, but the first part is true. That's really funny, actually. I believe that, though. From Binary Ghost with the $5, MAGA appears to have been hijacked and is now in the process of being scuttled by neocons like the Tea Party was. I don't know, man. Well, I guess we'll have to see. From Demtro with the $5, the list you have of things to review, are those items part of your debate notes? Would like to have them for review also. Yeah, so those are just things for me to take a look at on my, so like, if you see like to be sorted, these are just like a list of things that I need to read that probably belong in the debate notes, but I haven't read them yet. So if that's what you're talking about in the debate notes, the list of things to review or to be sorted, they're just things I haven't read yet. From Ryan Gasling with the 2 pounds, Dr. Blitz just doesn't want MAGA to cure autism. It's true, I don't. Yep, that's me. From Binary Ghost with the $10, I remember the vaccines and autism thing starting out with the left-wing kooks. Exactly. They heal you with crystals, good vibes, and Whole Foods shopping crowd. There have been lots of left and right shifts. Right. Yeah, so being a vaccine denier used to be a left-wing thing. Now it's not. And so you could say that, like, maybe, I don't know, 30 years ago, the left was anti-science, but like, it's not anymore. From Ryan Gasling with the 2 pounds, the GOP did bring back measles, so there's that. That's true, they did bring back measles. I love that for them. From Binary Ghost with the $10, I remember, oh, I already read that. That's weird. From Neural Void with the 5 pounds, the Lorenzo tractor models chaotic systems like climate, ecology, and disease, set variables, run simulations, and observe emergent behavior. Well, I think it's probably a little bit more complicated than that, but sure. From Rar Espada with the $5, this guest arguing that conservatives do more for nature conservation right after Trump defunds the national parks is infuriating. I didn't know that, but that's very sad, and I don't like that at all. From Jack Fetter with the $5, drill baby drill, clean oil, clean coal, windmills kill, global warming hoax, none of them push back. What's the diff if they are or aren't same result? Right, I mean, like, yeah, it's clearly we know that coal is dangerous, right? Like coal is one of the leading causes of cancer. Then as far as energy production is concerned, coal mining and coal burning is one of the biggest causes of like radiation and cancer relative to anything, basically. One sec, I just shut the door. Sorry about that. From Ryan Gasling with the £2, like cutting free school meals for 500,000 plus children. That's bad. Also not really related to science, at least not directly. From Dr. Fudge with the $10, Raziel got BTFO on every single atheist call-in show several times, yours twice if I remember correctly, and was banned on your Discord for having an insane crash up, by the way. It says particles in motion a lot. Oh, so he lied to me. Okay, well, we'll put him on the internet anyway. From LCPL Morbid with the $2. I'm not a lefty, by the way. That's cool. From Ellie Els with the €2. GMOs potentially awesome. Copywriting them? Yeah, I mean, that's roughly my view. Like, GMOs are just the natural evolution of the selective breeding that we've been doing for millennia, right? It seems like you shouldn't be able to copyright that, though. That seems kind of screwed up. From Spammeals with the $10, classic MAGA argument. P1, wah. P2, boohoo. Conclusion, MAGA. Yeah, no, that's absolutely it. From Magic Drop with the $5, quick, call the wambulance. The left just proved me wrong. They must be lying. I mean, yeah, he got wrecked on a bunch of points. I mean, I will absolutely grant that according to the Reuters or the Gallup poll, Democrats are less likely. It's less than the majority of Democrats are in favor of using nuclear energy. According to the Pew poll, it was slightly a slight majority. So it seems to still be a pretty 50-50 kind of thing. Or it seems to be still, you know, it's not clear like whether Democrats are supporting it or against it. It's not clear, definitely. Now the question is why do they not support it? And you can look into that. You know, there could be reasons that are anti-science, that it's just people being ill-informed, and so they're, you know, going against the scientific consensus. And there could be reasons that are unrelated to the benefits and the scientific truths of the matter. For example, you might prefer that money go towards other kinds of renewables, like solar panels or windmills, in which case you would be against putting money towards nuclear. So like there could be different reasons as to why someone is against this. But yeah, that is, I'm absolutely willing to agree that it seems like on the whole, Democrats are less likely to think that nuclear should be supported than Republicans are. Absolutely. From Alexander with the $5, greetings from the People's Democratic Republic of Kentucky. All hail General Secretary McConnell. True. The one, the only, the left. From Positron with the $2. 145 IQ veteran on the left supporting nuclear. Well, I appreciate that, but also IQ is lame. From Neural Void with the £2, bring me up, my facts won't care about his feelings. I don't bring up support except in very, very rare examples. From D-Bizzle with the $5, coping, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Yeah. From Demtra with the $2, old person alive for things in the 80s, ouch. Look, if you were like an adult or like even a teenager in the 80s, you're in your 50s, right? And from Jimmy Snow, hey, it's Jimmy Snow with the $10. You're cool. Well, you're cool too, Jimmy Snow. I appreciate you. Yeah, so that's really neat. Look, so I am going to make sure I didn't miss any super chats and or any cash apps or anything, and then we will probably call it a day because I need some coffee. And we don't have enough time for another guest. Okay, it looks like I didn't miss anything. So thank you guys so much for being here. We will be back with the normally scheduled atheist content tomorrow at around the same time. You guys know where to find me, when to find me. But if you don't know where to find me or when to find me, feel free to join my Discord. Go to discord.gg/drblitz and we can... I send out my announcements for... Send out my announcements for when I'm going live there. I send out announcements for when I post videos there. You can also ask questions. I'm pretty active there as well. We have one final super chat from Positron X with the $5. I agree. IQ is lame. Use your Blitz powers to make me smarter, please. I'll do my best. You seem like you're a pretty smart guy, though. All right. Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow.